Chapter 949. The stewardess's voice rang out once more, signaling for the passengers to return to their seats. She had to find the culprit before the cabin door closed. Bojio had to drag the culprit down before the plane took off. Otherwise, what would happen to the National League? Once the plane took off, it would take more than a day for them to return. Was it the one on the left or the one on the right? Bojio pondered as she walked forward. She paused for a second. In that second, there was only one thought in her mind. If it was the Almighty, how would he differentiate? Actions were controlled by the person. Words and appearances could be deceiving. But his actions and micro-expressions were subconscious. This was when she had been very young. Her little canine pet had told her about it. At that time, she had been obsessed with dismantling keyboards and climbing walls. He had been the only one who had been leaning against the headboard like a little prince, dressed in pure white pajamas, reading a book that she couldn't understand. It had been like a bedtime story, reading to her. From time to time he would pull himself away from the book, glancing at her sleepy eyes. Stupid. He wouldn't forget to pat her when he said those words. When she had been young, he had taught her half of the things she knew. Sometimes humans were mysterious. The influence between them seemed to have been predestined from the start. Hence, when Bojio walked forward again, her dark gaze landed on their expressions and actions. Both of them were anxious. After all, everyone wanted to know when the plane would take off. However, after one of them raised his hand to look at the time, he began to play with his phone again, as if he was chatting. The other one turned towards Bojio, his gaze making it seem as though he had to be wary of anyone who entered. Bojio didn't avoid his gaze. Instead, she walked towards him with her boarding pass, just like an ordinary person looking for her seat. She walked forward with her small luggage, glancing at the seat number from time to time. Seeing this, the tall and slender man shifted his gaze back to his watch. After all, in his eyes, a high school student posed no threat at all. Moreover, the last person who came up was carrying a suitcase. If they were really here to capture him, they wouldn't take anything with them. The tall and slender man thought of the usual Interpol methods, but he wasn't aware of it. The young man in front of him was most familiar with how criminals thought. If she was the one escaping, she would also pay attention to the last person to enter the plane, and she would also observe who didn't take their luggage. Therefore, before entering the plane, the first thing she did was to grab a small suitcase. There was nothing in the suitcase, but she dragged it along to complete a layer of disguise. Bojio placed the suitcase down. She seemed to have found her position, but she wasn't sure. She glanced back and forth. At this moment, the tall and slender man was even less concerned. Listening to the countdown of the last minute, he flipped open the newspaper and was about to enjoy the moment of takeoff. The young man bent down, his silver hair faintly peeking out where his eyes were. The side of his face was as fair as jade, clean and handsome. "Sir, you seem to be sitting in the wrong seat. F12D, is this the right seat?" Bojio handed the boarding pass over. The tall and slender put down the newspaper and said in a normal voice, "This is my seat. Your seat is behind me." "Really?" The youngster laughed, a sinister aura in her voice. "I don't think your seat should be here, it should be in prison." With that, the tall and slender man's expression changed. He held on to the old man beside him, wanting to use him as a hostage. But in that instant there was a loud crack. His wrists, which were holding onto the newspaper, were locked together. The young man's movements were extremely fast. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, he directly pressed his entire head onto the small table. There was a loud bang. The tall and slender man was still in a state of shock. That was when he realized that the youngster wasn't holding a boarding pass, it was a piece of white paper. The old man beside him was the first to react, exclaiming in shock. The air stewardesses were even more eager to rush over to them. But before they could move, a tall and slender figure appeared in front of the cabin door. A tall and slender figure appeared in front of the cabin door. It was Chin Mo. He had been in the tunnel all along, waiting for this sound. No matter who went in, he could remain calm and unhurried. But when it was that guy, Chin Mo had to admit that he had been slightly worried. He had been worried that there might be something he hadn't predicted. He had been worried that the criminal might have a weapon. But from the looks of it, The operation was going smoothly. With such a person appearing in front of the cabin, the air stewardesses would definitely cover their mouths instinctively. Police case. Qin Mo had already taken Director Huang's identification. He raised his right hand, releasing his aura. Everyone, please remain seated. Can I trouble the people in the middle to move aside so my men can bring him out? With such a sudden turn of events, everyone's first reaction would be to stand up and watch. But after Qin Mo finished speaking, 6 to 7 special police officers appeared behind him. No one dared to move. The old couple who were closest to Bo Jiu were in a state of shock. Bo Jiu seemed to have noticed them. After knocking them out, she lifted them up forcefully. She didn't stay any longer. The tall and slender man was held down by 2 special police officers as he walked towards the cabin entrance. When he caught sight of Qin Mo, his dazed mind snapped back to reality. He turned around abruptly and looked at the young man from before. Silver hair, black eyes, and an eye-catching face. He was supposed to be their next target, the young master of the Fu family, who was closest to Qin Mo. But their information hadn't mentioned him. Not only did he know how to disguise himself, he was also skilled. Inexplicably, a chill ran down the tall and slender man's spine. How much exactly did they know about the youngster who was always by Qin Mo's side? According to the information, the youngster didn't just know how to play games, he seemed to have some knowledge of computers as well. It had been countless times that their plans had been forced to stop because of a single person's cyber attack. The other party had even changed their bomb sequence without them knowing. They hadn't even been able to find out the other party's identity. But now the tall and slender man had a terrifying thought. If the person who had been disrupting their plans was this youngster, then the consequences. The tall and slender man didn't dare to continue the thought. His face was already covered by a black cloth. The moment the cabin door closed, Qin Mo reached out and pulled Bo Jiu into his embrace. Qin Mo reached out and pulled Bo Jiu into his arms, acting as though there was no one else around. The Interpol officers glanced at each other, seeing the shock in each other's eyes. They hadn't expected them to have such a relationship other than being battle partners. The 2 Interpol officers were desperate for information. Once they caught the tall and slender man, they would join the interrogation. Qin Mo didn't follow them because he knew they wouldn't speak so easily. Before leaving the airport, Qin Mo instructed Director Huang, check the accounts under his various identities. Who are their financial transactions with? Who are the most frequent financial transactions? Director Huang was smart. You're saying that the one he has the most frequent contact with is his superior? No. Qin Mo glanced at Director Huang, his voice calm. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be any financial dealings within an organization. The ones that do are their partners, for example, the traitor in the crime squad. The moment the word traitor was mentioned, Director Huang's expression turned solemn. I understand. Bo Jiu sat at the front passenger seat, watching as Director Huang's figure grew smaller. She turned over. Little Huang really knows? If there really are financial dealings, it must be a huge sum. He would be able to know every single operation, and every single one of them is a crucial one. Otherwise, the news wouldn't have been leaked so quickly. This person could even make use of the new criminal psychologist to take away your authority. His position shouldn't be low. Indeed, it isn't low. At the very least, it would be someone of the same rank or above. Qin Mo made use of the red light to light a cigarette. He held it with one hand, his features sharp. He knows that it's just a few people. He knows about the politics of the government. Leaking information isn't something a single person can do. If the investigation starts, all the related personnel will be held accountable. Qin Mo took advantage of the time to wait for the traffic light to turn red. Behind every major case, there would be corruption. That was the reality in every country. As a hacker, Bo Jiu knew it better than anyone else. But I didn't know high schoolers these days would know so much. The Almighty's casual comment made Bo Jiu's heart flutter. She broke into a smile. There are so many movies and dramas, it's easy to understand. Corruption starts from the beginning, that's why there's an oversight. You know me, I love police dramas. Is that so? Qin Mo glanced at the youngster. I remember your bookshelf only has novels like Overbearing CEO Falls in Love with Me. There aren't any police dramas. Of course, she wouldn't read police dramas since the robbers would always be caught. Bojo didn't want to be caught. Just as she was thinking about how to reply without being discovered, a voice suddenly rang beside her ear. It seems like the things placed in the Fu family's house aren't what you like, it's what you liked in the past. Chinmo's voice was calm. Sometimes, I really wonder if you're that young Master Fu. In that instant, the air in the car seemed to have frozen. The two men's eyes met. One was extremely deep. The other was so dark that it was translucent. Neither of them shifted their gazes away. Bojo's heart seemed to be nailed to the ground, beating slowly, until the phone rang. Bojo broke into a faint smile. If I'm not me, who else can I be? Let's pick up the call. With that, Bojo tilted her head, placing the phone beside her ear. Regardless of who was calling, Bojo was grateful. The moment the call went through, a voice came through. Little Spade, where are you? I'm at your door, hurry over. Chapter 950. He didn't wait for her to speak before hanging up. Bojo reached for her phone. Chinmo arched a brow. Lin Feng. MH. Chinmo chuckled, but there wasn't much warmth in his eyes. Do you really intend to sleep there? From your tone it sounds like it. Bojo watched the Almighty's sculpted face, feeling an inexplicable sense of misfortune. Speaking of misfortune, Lin Feng really fit the description. Originally, he had left the house valiantly and slammed the door loudly, intending to stay in a hotel for 2 days. It's not like he doesn't have money, right? Who knew that he wouldn't have brought his wallet when he left the house? If he had money, he could take a taxi since he could pay with his phone. But he needed an identification card to stay in a hotel. He couldn't leave in the day and return at night. How could that be considered running away from home? It would be like a child playing house. But for him to return to get his identification card, it would be too embarrassing. Yinhu must be mocking him now. How could he be so hesitant to leave home? All the more reason why he couldn't return. He would definitely find fault with him. Even if he didn't find fault with him, he would definitely take a look at him. Not to mention the things written in the text. It was too frightening. He actually wanted to use those techniques on him. F***ck, did he really think he was a pushover? That was why he had to wander outside. Thinking of this, Lin Feng kicked the wall heavily. The kick was so painful that his entire body arched. F***ck. This was the scene that Chinmo and Bojo saw when they drove back. Honestly, only a naive person would kick a wall when they couldn't get over it. Lin Feng's existence was the perfect definition of that word. Bojo rolled down the car window. She leaned against the window and whistled. After hearing the whistle, Lin Feng's first reaction was to look behind him. He saw the silver-haired youngster sitting in the car, looking at him with a leisurely smile on his lips. This posture is really handsome. That's right. Lin Feng was about to say more when he realized that the car in front of him was familiar. When he took a closer look, he saw a noble and aloof face. All of a sudden, Lin Feng swallowed the words he wanted to say. F***ck, why didn't Little Spade tell him that Captain was here too? Lin Feng knew how to restrain himself in front of Chinmo. For example, he didn't place his arm around Little Spade's body like he usually did. Instead, when they reached the living room, he started to complain. Anyway, I don't plan to go back. Arrange a room for me. Bojo glanced at Lin Feng, thinking that he wouldn't be able to win against Almighty Yun at his level. He hadn't considered the possibility of him finding his way over. You don't know how miserable I've been lately. Lin Feng hugged the cushion on the sofa. He glanced up at the ceiling before turning to Bojo. I'm a grown man and I still have to guard against my brother taking advantage of me. In the past, we could still talk about the weather and girls. When the room gets hot, we could remove our shirts whenever we wanted. We could play games or watch porn together. Now I have to wrap myself up tightly at home. Let's not talk about putting our arms around each other's shoulders. If we were to get any closer, I would lose my integrity. Mother****, of all the things that guy could be thinking about, he just had to think about my chrysanthemum. Bojo didn't say a word. She just smiled. Little submissive Lin looked rather pitiful. Hey little spade, do you have beer? Lin Feng didn't feel like he was suffering at all. He was the one attacking, wasn't he? Bojo didn't want to laugh too much. She held her chin and arched a brow lazily. Yes, why? Give me a can first, I'm suffocating. Lin Feng placed the cushion at the side, his eyes bright. Qin Emo walked over and tossed a can of beer to Lin Feng. His tone was calm. Why? He doesn't even allow you to drink. That's not it. Without a second thought, Lin Feng pulled open the can of beer, tilted his head back, and drank a mouthful. I'm afraid I'll drink too much and give Yinhu another chance. He's not easy to deal with, so I have to stay sober. Qin Emo glanced at him, replying slowly, I see. Think about it, aren't I pitiful? I love drinking and eating meat skewers, but I'm not allowed to drink Budweiser. It's killing me, Lin Feng said, taking another sip. Qin Emo sat there, tossing another can of beer to him. Indeed, do you need someone to prepare some food to go with the alcohol? Lin Feng had never seen his captain so caring. Was it because of Little Spade? Tsk. That was why people in love. It was unbelievable. But such a huge change in his captain was rather frightening. Lin Feng caressed his arm. It wasn't much, he just wanted to eat and drink to his heart's content. Everything else wasn't important to him. Chen Xiaodong stood at the side, confused. That wasn't it. What exactly did he hear? Almighty Yin had been thinking about Almighty Lin, and he was so blatant about it. In the past, he had always thought that the rumors on the internet were lies. After all, he knew that when people interacted with their brothers, they would naturally put their arms around each other's shoulders. He didn't understand what the girls were screaming about. Weren't Almighty Yin and Almighty Lin normal? Why did they suddenly become abnormal? No, that wasn't right. Why were there suddenly gay men around him? Young Master was gay, Almighty Qin had been turned gay by his young master, and now, Almighty Lin and Almighty Yin were at such a stage. It could be said that as a straight man, he was under a lot of pressure when there were gays around him. It was better to call Madam and ask her to continue shopping with Movie Queenin. It was too dangerous at home. Chen Xiaodong was afraid that He Honghua wouldn't be able to take it. It was fine that young master was gay, but there were so many of his kind around him. After placing the dishes on the table, Chen Xiaodong went to do his own things. Before he left, he glanced at the empty beer cans at the side. There were quite a lot of them. Bojo was looking at the food as well. As she ate, she arched a brow. As expected, someone was going to be in trouble. Lin Feng was a naive boy. He didn't even realize that the Almighty was trying to force him to drink. This person. Bojo didn't know what to say. At this moment, Lin Feng bolted upright. His body was shaking and his words weren't clear. No, I have to make a phone call and show off to that guy. Bojo shook his glass. It was empty. She glanced at the bottle of Maotai the Almighty had pushed over. Needless to say, Lin Feng definitely drank too much. What are you showing off for? Bojo thought to herself. Lin Feng tossed his phone onto the table before picking it up. He dialed a string of numbers. Showing off that I successfully ran away from home. Bojo. What's there to show off? At this moment, Lin Feng's phone was connected. It was on speaker mode. The voice on the other end was familiar and steady, but there was a tinge of anxiousness. Where are you? I burp? Why should I tell you? Lin Feng burped, looking rather arrogant. To Bojo, he was asking for trouble. Yinhu's fingers stilled. You drank? I didn't just drink, I ate meat too. That's right. I even saw. Lin Feng wanted to say that he saw a girl, but after scanning the surroundings, there wasn't a single girl. He changed his words. I even saw a hunk. Yinhu narrowed his eyes, his tone turning cold. Which hunk? A hunk with silver hair. Lin Feng was drunk, acting rather stupid. Don't bother about that. I'm just telling you. I won't be going back today. You can play with yourself. Yinhu arched a brow. A hunk with silver hair? Why? Lin Feng lifted his chin proudly. Can't I have silver hair? I'm more handsome than you anyway. Yinhu's voice was unhurried, as though he had changed into another person. There was even a hint of a smile in his voice. Why not? Have fun. Then Yinhu ended the call. Lin Feng, who was hung up on, was a little confused. She turned towards Bojio. What does he mean by that? Does he not believe that I'm with a hunk? Bojio held her forehead. He didn't want to talk nonsense with you anymore, and was coming to fetch you. Who else do you know besides me, the silver-haired hunk? Bojio wouldn't say that out loud. Lin Feng, the naive fool, had no chance of being saved. At this stage, Qin Mo shook the wine glass in his hand. Even Qin Mo shook the wine glass in his hand, his voice indifferent. It seems like I saved a phone call. That was right. The Almighty had wanted to get Lin Feng drunk because he had a plan. But who would have expected Lin Feng to be so careless? What was this? Did he pack himself up and send it to someone else's mouth to eat? Student Lin Feng, who was drunk, didn't realize this problem and insisted on having a heart-to-heart talk with Bojio. Tell me, isn't he too much? I still don't have a proper girlfriend, and every girl that tries to get close to me is because of him. I don't trust women anymore, F***CK. You want a girlfriend? Bojio had always believed that relationships shouldn't be forced. If Lin Feng really wanted a girlfriend, she had to make him stay. Lin Feng shook his head. That isn't the main point. If that isn't the main point, then what is? Bojio arched a brow. Lin Feng took another sip of beer, his expression serious. Do I look like a bottom? Aren't those texts supposed to put me on the top? So you're conflicted about the top? Bojio's lips twitched. Lin Feng waved his hands. That's not it. I can't explain it clearly. I just don't like being controlled. I don't care when he goes out to eat with other girls. Bojio. Was this the time to complain? Senior Lin, you're getting more and more gay. Where's the beer? Lin Feng's beautiful eyes narrowed. Give me another bottle. I have to get drunk with Little Spade today. Little Spade, you can tell me what you are unhappy with, Captain. Don't worry, I will never tell Captain. It will be a secret between us forever. Lin Feng's beautiful eyes narrowed. Fine. He was so drunk that he didn't even know the Almighty was there. Bojio was really worried about a certain someone tonight. To be honest, I really didn't think that Captain would actually be pursued by you. I always thought that the girl he kissed at the ball was his true love. Lin Feng shook his head. Captain is too fickle. When Qin Mo heard this, he raised his eyebrows slowly and smiled. There was an obvious coldness at the corners of his lips. If you get caught by Yinhu tonight, will you die a horrible death? How is that possible? Lin Feng stuttered. That guy must have never expected me to be here. He must be thinking I'm having a date at some hotel. Is that so? Qin Mo lifted the corners of his lips. Bojio watched as the Almighty sent a message to Almighty Yun. Bring him back. The reply came swiftly. I'm on my way, I'll be there soon. Indeed, from Lin Feng's words, Almighty Yun already knew where he was. But Lin Feng didn't feel any sense of danger. He continued to burp. Little Spade, who do you think that girl is? Oh right. Tell me honestly. What kind of clothes were you wearing that day? Why didn't we find you? Guess. Bojio leaned back lazily. Lin Feng shook his head. It must have been ugly, I know how it feels. Dressing up as a girl is going to kill straight guys like us. Burp, that's not right, you aren't straight, you are gay. Wait a minute, stop swaying, let me see for myself. Why does it look so familiar? I remember now, that girl had the same eyes that day. Bojio frowned, wondering if she had been recognized. She didn't want to be recognized. Her head hurt. Even Qin Mo turned to look at Lin Feng when he heard this. It was obvious that Lin Feng was still deep in thought, but only he knew what he was thinking. Bojio was about to speak. Lin Feng slapped his forehead. Little Spade, don't tell me you have a younger sister that you haven't introduced to us. Bojio. What a naive mind. Always so curious. Your younger sister is really pretty. Lin Feng was lost in his own imagination. Did Captain agree because you look similar to your younger sister? Sigh. It's another story about a substitute. Little Spade, you're really pitiful. Bojio was speechless. Why would a straight guy like you want to read a substitute story? Who said a straight guy can't read a substitute story? Lin Feng shouted again. I like it. When Qin Mo heard this, he lost his patience. He sent a few more words. Where are you? Very quickly, 2 words appeared on the screen. Entrance. After Qin Mo finished reading, he stood up without a change in expression. Lin Feng hooked his arm around Bojio's shoulders, speaking the truth between brothers. Brother, let me tell you, there aren't any good men. If Captain treats you as a substitute, you have to kick him out. I will fight with you and kick Huzi out. I think you should turn to take a look before you say that. Bojio held her chin, reminding him calmly. Chapter 951. The moment Lin Feng said that. In an instant, the air around the newcomer became colder. Yinhu didn't look happy either. Bojio felt that this person was hopeless. He couldn't even recognize a wolf. It would be strange if he wasn't taken away. Yinhu glanced over at him. Lin Feng was still chuckling. Come, handsome, sit down and have a drink. This skill of being familiar with others was really inviting a wolf into the house. Bojio watched as Lin Feng drank another can of beer. Yinhu was sitting beside him. He touched his lips subconsciously, but he didn't even press his lips. Lin Feng was straightforward, slapping his tongue. Handsome, have we met before? With that, Lin Feng frowned again, leaning towards Bojio seriously. He lowered his voice. Little spade, don't you think this guy looks like someone? MMH. Bojio replied lazily. A little. She sat back and watched as Lin Feng courted his own death. Burp. Wait a minute, let me think. Lin Feng shook his head, his expression solemn. It wasn't easy for him to make eye contact. His gaze wasn't as blurry as before, but when he met that chiseled and handsome face he froze. He pulled Bojio over, turning his head. F***CK. Why is he here? When did he come? How did he find us? This isn't logical. Bojio took out her phone, smiling faintly as she pressed the record button, gesturing for him to listen carefully. Lin Feng was still in a daze, swaying back and forth before he heard the voice. Where are you? I burp? Why should I tell you? You drank. I didn't just drink, I ate meat too. That's right. I saw a hunk. Which hunk? A silver-haired hunk. You don't have to care about this. I'm telling you, I'm not going back today. You can play with yourself. A silver-haired hunk. Why? Can't he have silver hair? He's more handsome than you anyway. There's nothing wrong with that, have fun. Do. After listening to this recording, Lin Feng's IQ was finally restored to its previous level. Now that he knew the truth, he was on the verge of tears. He wished he could find a hole to crawl into and bury himself alive. He was the one who said that Yinhu would find his way here. From the moment he entered, Yinhu hadn't said a word. Instead, he swept a glance at the empty wine cans on the ground. There were about a dozen of them. It seemed like he hadn't been drinking recently, and had been craving for so much. This made it easier for him to take her away. Who gave you the wine? Yinhu asked. Lin Feng felt that he had to put up a front, and let out a drunken burp. Captain gave it to me. You want to pick a fight with the captain? Bojio facepalmed again. Yet Yinhu only glanced at him. He sat beside that person, his expression unchanged, but his words were routine. I know you didn't dare to drink in front of me, but you dared to after coming out. Who said I didn't dare to? Lin Feng opened another can of wine, drinking in a heroic manner. In less than 2 cans, his eyes started to blur again. He probably couldn't recognize anyone, otherwise he wouldn't be looking at Qin Mo. Little spade, come, let's have a pajama party. With that, he leaned towards Qin Mo. Qin Mo blocked him with his left hand, his eyes fixed on Yinhu. Aren't you going to take him away? Yinhu pulled Lin Feng back. You want to have a pajama party? Burp, yes. Lin Feng stood up shakily. Yinhu pulled him towards the door. Let's go home, I'll play with you. Lin Feng didn't even know how Yinhu had shoved him into the car. He was still dizzy. He looked sober, glancing up with a determined expression. I'm not going home. I'm still running away from home. Then where do you want to go? Yinhu glanced at the road ahead. Lin Feng glanced outside, burping again. To the hotel? No, I can't go to the hotel. I didn't bring my identity card. If Yinhu finds out, he will definitely mock me. Is that so? Yinhu watched a certain someone in a daze. This fellow was still as careless as before, forgetting his wallet when he left home. MMH, Lin Feng replied, burping again. After a while he asked, "Why does this road look so familiar?" "The roads are all the same, of course it looks familiar." Yin Hu continued to turn the steering wheel. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes, looking extremely heroic. "You're right, where are we going now?" "To my house." Yin Hu's voice was still as calm as before. "Don't you want to have a pajama party?" Lin Feng nodded. "Yes, a pajama party." With that he frowned. "Why does this road look so familiar? I remember now, this is the road to my house." Did he recognize him? At a red light, Yin Hu stopped the car, turning his head, meeting a certain someone's hazy eyes. Lin Feng didn't realize how much his face could hurt the people who liked him. Moreover, when he was drunk, it made people want to go over and kiss him. "I got it." Lin Feng shook himself, trying to sit up straight. "Your house and mine are in the same direction. Handsome, we are really fated." "Indeed." Yin Hu restarted the car, thinking that he shouldn't have placed too much hope on a certain someone's intelligence. Lin Feng felt a little high. Burp, we have to have another drink." "It's fated." "Sure." Yin Hu drove the car into the courtyard. Lin Feng looked around. "Military Base 1 Burp, it seems real. When did such a small area appear beside our house? Why didn't I know about it?" Yin Hu changed the gear, stopped the car, and helped Lin Feng down. "No, that's not right. I'm still running away from home. This is Military Base 1. I want to go that way." Lin Feng pointed in the direction of the main entrance. Yin Hu helped him forward 3 steps. "This is the right way." "Do you think I can't tell the direction when I'm drunk?" Lin Feng shook his head, trying to sober himself up. "I'm telling you, I can still drink another 30 bottles. Let's go back to the room, I'll drink with you," Yin Hu said faintly, carrying Lin Feng up. The two of them even had their auras entangled together. Even though there were other cars in the courtyard, the headlights couldn't reach them. It was as if the two of them were in another small world. No one would disturb them. The night sky darkened. Fu family's villa. At this moment, Bojiu felt that it wasn't a good thing that the naive Lin Feng had left. With Lin Feng around, she would at least be safe. But now she wasn't so sure. The Almighty's unique minty tobacco scent wafted through the air. "Is there something you forgot to do?" "What?" Bojiu arched a brow. "Help me bathe." Chinemo inched closer, so close that Bojiu stilled. She tilted her head to look into his deep eyes. Her thighs were separated by a layer of cloth, the temperature rising. Her breath became his scent, as though the Almighty's scent was infecting her body. Before Bojiu could open her mouth, her words were cut off by a kiss. First, it was a light lick. Once his handsome face was so close, it was easy to lose her ability to think. Chinemo used this force to carry her up and sit on the sofa. His tongue pushed open her lips and entered her mouth, their tongues intertwining. He didn't give her any chance to regret. Bojiu couldn't resist his kiss. The numbness at the tip of her tongue, and the melting water kneading made it hard for Bojiu to breathe. Until the Almighty released her. Her mind was blank for a few seconds. It was the days after the pleasure. The numbness spread from her tailbone to her entire body, as though she had been electrocuted. Her heartbeat was extremely strong. Not to mention the position between her and the Almighty. She was sitting on the Almighty's lap. He could even feel something boiling hot pressing against him. Under such circumstances, she couldn't agree to the bathing. Bojiu stood up, her ears flushed. "I'll look for Xiaodong, he'll help you bathe." Of course, Chinemo wouldn't allow Chen Xiaodong to touch him. He glanced at Bojiu before glancing at the time, his voice hoarse. "Help me bathe after the National League. You can bathe yourself." Chinemo said the last few words slowly and deeply. Bojiu thought, I might not be here after the National League, but she didn't say it out loud. To her, the National League was a dividing line. After they won the National League, the Fu family would be back and everything would be in He Honghua's hands again. When that happened, it would be time for her to leave. She would use her identity to pursue the criminal. She activated the USB. This meant that she would have to return to the darkness. Chinemo could tell that she wasn't paying attention. He didn't like her expression at this moment. It was as though she didn't care. She could withdraw at any time and end it at any time. Their relationship wasn't the kind that could end at any time. If she couldn't realize this, he would make her realize it. Bojo thought she was safe. Unexpectedly, the moment she entered the room, she was about to bring a pillow to the guest room. The Almighty pushed her against the wall and gave her another round of powerless kisses. Bojo couldn't take it. Her legs were numb and soft. When she regained her senses, she was carried onto the bed. Bojo's bed was a single bed, much narrower than a double bed. This bed was convenient for Chin Mo to a certain extent. The two of them were very close. That handsome face that made her heart race was right in front of her eyes. Chin Mo lowered his lids to look at the person in his arms. Even the scorching breath could stir up one's spirit. Since you don't want to help me, I can help you. With that, Chin Mo carried her again and kicked the bathroom door open. When the shower started, both of their clothes were wet. It was cold water and wasn't warm yet. When it splashed on their bodies, it made them shudder. Chin Mo skillfully removed the cloth strips. As the cloth fell off, the water started to heat up. Everything was different. Bojo was wearing a black t-shirt. Now that it was wet, it was sticking to her body. Chin Mo's eyes darkened at the sight of her curvaceous figure. Without any hesitation, he carried her up and placed her on the counter. His gaze deepened. Chin Mo watched as the clear water droplets slid down the youngster's clean and devilish cheeks. Her wet silver hair fell down and stuck to the side of her ears. The color of her lips was even more alluring. The outline of her waist was smooth and supple. Under the water vapor, there was a bewitching color. The water droplets continued to roll down, landing on the back of Chin Mo's hand. Such a scene was especially ambiguous. It was like a beautiful and oppressive dream, teasing one's heart to the point where it was no longer calm. Bojo went numb and wanted to push him away. But Chin Mo pressed her down, his warm breath hitting the back of her ears. He chuckled. Your breathing is messed up too. It seems like you want me to give you more. The water vapor gathered. Enveloped in the smoky water vapor, Bojo's black t-shirt was crumpled beyond recognition. Chin Mo pushed it to her heart. His thin lips landed, every kiss hot. Bojo trembled. A young lady's body couldn't withstand such teasing. She didn't have any defense against Chin Mo. The water droplets splashed down. Chin Mo didn't turn off the shower. When he stepped on her pants, he arched his waist and barged in. Bojo couldn't withstand that kind of speed. Everything was messed up. It was hot and numb. The water droplets splashed on her body. Her only support was him. And this time the force was unprecedentedly strong. He nibbled on her ear and pressed his chest against her back. She braced her hands against the wall as if to soften the impact of the blow. But when he stopped, there was hope that he could regain his previous strength. Chin Mo paused, moving closer to the youngster's face. His voice was low. Tell me, why do you want to leave? Bojo frowned slightly. Her snow-white skin was on full display, especially when the cloth around her chest was undone. She really became a seductive demon. Even the corners of her eyes were tainted with a tenderness that made people want to destroy her. But the stubbornness of biting her lips made her even more irresistible. Chin Mo held her waist, coaxing her. Tell me, who did you learn your hacking skills from? Self-study. Bojo uttered the word, her voice trailing off. Her seductive waist trembled unconsciously. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. Do you think I'll believe you? Bojo didn't want to continue this topic. She turned her face, smiling seductively. Brother Mo, don't you think it's a waste of time to ask such questions at this time? Or, Brother Mo, are you out of energy? Out of energy? Chin Mo pressed her into his arms, his voice so deep that it was raspy. I'll show you now if I still have the strength. Chapter 952. When Bojo dashed out, her waist and legs were still affected. But after teasing the Almighty, she was still in a good mood. Even when she was eating breakfast, her lips were still in a smile. Chen Xiaodong arranged the things before heading upstairs and knocking on the guest room door. He wondered if Almighty Qin would have a bad temper when he woke up. Madam had passed the task of waking him up to him. He was really scared out of his wits. He knocked 3 times but no one answered. Chen Xiaodong pressed his ear against the door, about to say something. The door behind him opened. Almighty Qin walked out with one hand in his pocket. He seemed to have just showered. He glanced at him, his gaze slow. What's the matter? Chen Xiaodong stilled. He glanced at the guest room he had knocked on, and then at the room Almighty Qin had come out from. His mouth was wide open enough to fit an egg. Almighty Qin had just come out from young master's room? At this hour? He had come out from young master's room. There was too much information. Chen Xiaodong could only hold it in. He couldn't say anything. Most importantly, he couldn't let Madame know. This time, young master was completely gay. He Honghua didn't know what was going on. She just felt that her Jiu was sitting there. Her lips were a little pink, and her eyes seemed to be open. After a night, she seemed to look much better. Her skin was still white, an indescribable change. Bo Jiu bit on a youtiao. Her waist was slightly sore, but with He Honghua around, she couldn't rub it. Fortunately, a phone call came in, allowing her to change her posture. Bo Jiu was delighted when she saw the caller. It was Lin Feng, that naive boy. Hello. The person sitting on the toilet wasn't wearing a shirt, only a pair of SpongeBob SquarePants boxers, exposing his ribs. When he heard the voice coming from the other side of the phone, he grabbed his hair, sounding extremely aggrieved. Little Spade, why didn't you stop Yin Hu yesterday? How can you be such a brother? Bo Jiu started to help Lin Feng recall. Last night, you were the one who thought Almighty Yin wasn't bad and insisted on having a drink with him. I never expected you to leave with him so obediently. I was so drunk that I didn't know it was him. Lin Feng was filled with regret. Bo Jiu didn't miss the chance to listen to the live broadcast. What about now? Where are you? What's going on? At the mention of this, Lin Feng felt miserable. Didn't I drink too much last night? You're a man, so you should know that when a man drinks too much, he can't control himself. That's why Almighty Yin finally slept with you. Using the scenes mentioned in the novel, Bo Jiu continued, going along with the flow. Lin Feng wanted to jump again. What do you mean he finally slept with me? I should be the one sleeping with him. Speaking up to this point, Lin Feng paused. It's not that exaggerated. He just helped me with something. Bo Jiu took a sip of water. What are you worried about? I'm AF * King Straight Man. How can I take that? Lin Feng pulled at his hair for a while. Most importantly, I blacked out yesterday. I don't know if I did anything to him after that. He's still lying on the bed and seems to be in pain. If I really did something to him because of alcohol, my conscience wouldn't be able to bear it. Bo Jiu caught on to the main point. You're saying that you drank too much last night and accidentally slept with Almighty Yin? That's right. Lin Feng sighed deeply, concluding, if that really happened, I can't be responsible for him. Bo Jiu wanted to tell him that it wouldn't happen, that he was overestimating his abilities. From front to back, from left to right, he seemed to be the one on the receiving end. You were already so drunk, Almighty Yin should be the one sleeping with you. How could you sleep with Almighty Yin? But Bo Jiu wasn't going to expose him. What do you intend to do now? Bo Jiu asked a practical question. Lin Feng was still sitting on the toilet, his handsome face filled with sorrow. I'll think about it. He hung up. Lin Feng wanted to smoke to calm himself down. He felt that he had let that fellow down, because he still had some memories from last night. That was strange. Why did he find that person so handsome? He probably knew that after the competition he would be leaving the country. He wanted to say something from the bottom of his heart, but for some reason as he spoke the feeling changed. It was probably because a man couldn't resist the temptation after drinking. Even now, when he closed his eyes, Lin Feng could hear what the person was saying beside his ear. The scorching hot breath hit the back of his ear. The voice was very low and had a little husky sexiness to it. Lin Feng, you're hard. Lin Feng didn't want to recall what happened next. Why did he lose control when he was drunk? He could have taken advantage of anyone, but he had to take advantage of Yin Hu. With that, Lin Feng glanced at himself. It's all your fault. Don't you know that no matter how good it is, you can't be gay? You brat. Just as Lin Feng was lecturing himself. Swoosh. The bathroom door was pulled open. Lin Feng braced himself, not daring to look up. Yin Hu leaned against the door, his face handsome and calm. He glanced over at a certain someone who had been pulling his hair in the bathroom ever since he woke up. His voice was calm. How much longer are you going to nag at your little Lin Feng? Little Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't want to comment on Yunhu's description. He was sad. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have run away from home yesterday. He had to maintain his dignity. Lin Feng coughed, feeling that he didn't have any dignity in his boxer shorts. He could only pretend to be calm. Leave first. Yunhu felt that his emotions weren't right. After yesterday's sweetness, he understood that he couldn't force him too much. He knew this better than anyone else. Lin Feng might look like that. In reality, he was more straightforward than anyone else. Ever since he was young, he had been thinking about marrying a cute girl. He said that girls had to be doted on, and that his wife couldn't be cold or hungry in the future. Hence, even cooking, which didn't fit his persona, was extremely good. Lin Feng had never known. When he heard those things, he didn't know how his heart worked. He wanted to let him get what he wanted. After all, this guy deserved to be treated gently. But he was jealous from the bottom of his heart. He was jealous of the girl who would get him in the future. He was so jealous that he didn't dare to voice his thoughts. If it hadn't been for Little Spade, this guy might never have been enlightened. With a couple by his side, he realized that he really liked him. It had never been brotherly love. Chapter 953. With that in mind, Yunhu's entire being became indescribably gloomy. His heart felt as though it had been stabbed. Regardless of how strong he appeared in front of that person, when he sat like this, he still felt a sense of despair. Bang! Lin Feng had probably made up his mind. He rushed out of the washroom. Originally, he wanted to tell him in one go that he really couldn't be gay and that they could be brothers again. But when he saw that person sitting there with a pale side profile, he couldn't say the words that were at the tip of his tongue. After all, Yunhu really looked as though he had done something to him. He looked a little pitiful. He had never seen such an expression on his face before. Come to think of it, it made sense. Even if Yunhu was gay, he should be the one on top. He could just treat him as a straight man. It probably wouldn't be easy for him to accept being defiled by him. When Yunhu heard the commotion, he glanced over. He had already recovered his usual calm demeanor, that gaze emotionless. But Lin Feng felt that there was a lot of meaning behind that gaze. In addition, Yunhu's current position. He seemed to have been rubbing his waist since just now. Even though Lin Feng was a newbie, he was a newbie who had seen porn. Every person who had been had probably looked like Yunhu now, his waist uncomfortable and different from usual. So last night, he really did something to Yunhu? Lin Feng inhaled deeply, looking at himself and then at Yunhu, his face solemn. Don't worry, I will take responsibility. Take responsibility? Yunhu was stunned by the sudden change. He didn't think that he had to take responsibility for helping him to masturbate. Or, did this guy misunderstand something again? Lin Feng sat down. His posture was a little chinibu. Luckily, his face was handsome. Although I was so impulsive because I was drunk, what I did is what I did. I will take responsibility for you. However, you have to give me a process. After all, I'm straight. I really don't understand what you gays are thinking, but I still have to take responsibility. Did it? Yunhu grasped the crux of the problem. Lin Feng pointed at his waist. His face was a little red. It's that. Are you okay now? Do you need me to go down and buy some medicine? It should be your first time down there, right? Is it still painful? If it hurts, don't hold it in. Tell me. It seemed like this idiot had forgotten that he had sprained his waist last night, when he was struggling to go home. Yunhu didn't know who had given him the wrong impression that he had slept with him. But Yunhu didn't intend to explain clearly. He didn't admit or deny it. Instead, his gaze deepened. To be honest, he still didn't understand the direction of a certain person's thoughts. When Lin Feng saw Yunhu turn his head away, he knew that Yunhu didn't want to talk to him. That's right, which man would still be in a good mood after being ked? If it was him, he had to beat him to death. Other than the fact that Huzi had ignored him when they were young. Today was the first time he didn't speak at all. Lin Feng was a little flustered. He pondered for a moment and said, "Wait, I'll go make another call." "Did you go to the toilet?" Yinhu glanced up, his voice slow. "Dressed like this?" Lin Feng lowered his head. It was indeed inappropriate. He looked at the clothes on the ground. They were already wrinkled and couldn't be worn at all. How intense had they been yesterday? The clothes were thrown on the ground. Lin Feng covered his eyes. Yinhu didn't need to look at him to know what he was thinking. It seemed like this guy had even forgotten that he had taken off his clothes, waved them in his hands, and thrown them on the ground casually. "I'm dressed." Lin Feng casually put on a pair of pants and said to Yinhu, "Wait for me." Yinhu reached out and grabbed his wrist. "Are you going to call Little Spade again? Tell me directly if you have anything. Why are you always calling Little Spade? Isn't he experienced? I wanted to ask how to deal with it, but you ignored me." Lin Feng grabbed his hair. Yinhu glanced at him. "Go ahead." MMH. Lin Feng flew into the washroom like a sparrow freed from its shackles. He called Little Spade and explained the situation before asking, "Do you think I should be more concerned about him? After all, it's his first time being F***ked. He probably can't accept it psychologically." Bojo didn't reply because the Almighty, who was sitting in front of her, took his phone over and showed her his screen. It was a message from Yinhu to the Almighty. There was only one line. "Regardless of what Lin Feng says, get Little Spade to agree." He was so scheming. Did Lin Feng know that he was naive? Bojo asked lazily, "Where are you now?" "In the washroom." Lin Feng glanced at the ceiling. "Do you understand how I feel? As though I've suddenly become a father?" Bojo thought to herself, "I've always been trying my best to be the Almighty's sugar daddy. What does a new father like you understand? Why are you always in the washroom?" "I'm not afraid of Yinhu hearing me." Lin Feng sighed. "You don't understand how complicated my feelings are. You are the one who doesn't understand. Almighty Yin can predict everything you say. Is there a need to listen? This naive girl. If you think you can turn gay for Almighty Yin, go ahead. If you can't, we're all adults and you don't have to be responsible for sleeping with him. In the end, it all depends on your heart. There are some things that can't be forced. It's best not to force yourself." Bojo's words were honest. It was because she treated them as friends. A relationship born from a misunderstanding wouldn't last long. Because she cared, the hurt would only deepen. But if Lin Feng was willing, the misunderstanding would be a beautiful one. But it was obvious that Qin Mo didn't like hearing her words. The feeling that this person was indifferent to everything came back again. It seemed as though even if he wanted her, it didn't mean that he had her. Qin Mo's heart tightened unconsciously, and even his gaze deepened. He had never been anyone's boyfriend. He wouldn't be. But this person seemed to have never treated him as a boyfriend. With that, Qin Mo reached out and lifted the youngster's chin. He leaned over and kissed her lips. Chen Xiaodong, who was standing at the side, thought. He hadn't expected to witness such a scene. It had happened without any warning. This was the Fu family's house. What if Madame saw? Bojo was startled when she felt a slight chill on her lips. Chapter 954. Bojo hadn't expected the Almighty to kiss her all of a sudden. She was still holding the phone in her hand. Her clean and fair face paused for a moment. She even forgot what she wanted to say. She could only look at the handsome face in front of her. When the kiss ended, her lips were brushed by his, and it was cold and ticklish. After Yinhu sent the WeChat message, he stuffed his phone into his pocket. When he saw him come out, he pretended to be uneasy and said, "You don't have to take responsibility, we are both guys. It's normal to sleep for a night. It's good enough that you didn't despise me." If Yinhu hadn't said that, Lin Feng wouldn't have felt sorry for him. Especially when he tilted his head, which made him look slightly fragile. "Are you sure it's fragile?" Qin Mo looked at the person in front of him who was holding her phone in a daze. Because she had just woken up, her silver hair was still fluffy. She looked like a little tiger that wanted to be pampered. He couldn't help but lift his thin lips and lean over to kiss the corner of her lips. Chen Xiaodong. "Mommy, I really don't want to see two guys kissing in front of me. I'm a straight guy, I'm gay. In Almighty Chin's eyes, didn't he, a third wheel, exist? Obviously not. Sometimes, kissing was a way to declare his ownership. It wasn't just to let others know. It was also to let Bojio know that she wasn't a big deal. Bojio blinked. The Almighty's gaze seemed to be deep. He seemed to like her, but at the same time, it seemed like he wanted to stuff her into the bin. Hey little spade. Hey, why aren't you saying anything? Is there no signal? On the other end of the line, Lin Feng glanced at his phone, assuming that the washroom was blocking his communication with his brother. Forget it, I've decided. I'm going to lay my cards on the table. Lin Feng put away his phone and pulled open the wooden door of the bathroom. Lin Feng's gaze was heavy. I have to take responsibility. Yin, who watched as a certain someone took the bait, looking valiant and high-spirited. He asked the most practical question. How do you intend to take responsibility? Marry you. Lin Feng added. I'll try my best to marry you. Oh. Yin, who didn't know what to say. This guy was still a straight guy. He wanted to marry her after sleeping with her. You should know how I feel about you. Yin, who followed his train of thought and said, I won't agree to the arranged marriage and marriage of convenience in novels. Lin Feng thought to himself. Of course I know what you mean. If you dare to bring up the matter of hitting me, I will cripple you right now. However, he had just slept with her, so he had to be gentle. Speak. Yin, who replied faintly, I want to kiss you the moment I see you, so let's start with kissing. Kiss. Lin Feng's eyes widened. This wasn't within his scope of consideration at all. Yin, who was a two-faced person. You weren't this excited when you hugged me yesterday. She hugged him and vomited, not daring to let go. Helplessly, when Lin Feng heard that, his mind automatically started to play some small scenes. His face turned red, and he felt very uneasy. All right. Yin, who arched a brow. What's good about it? Let's start with kissing. Lin Feng leaned over like a man, putting on an expression as if he was a paper tiger. Yin, who replied leisurely. Are you going to do it or should I? Of course I'll do it. I'll be the attacker. Lin Feng was very firm on this point. When Yin, who heard the words I'll be the attacker, his expression didn't change, he just arched a brow, his gaze deep as he looked at the person he could finally have. Even if it was an illusion. Lin Feng leaned over a little, and then a little more. When he was almost there, he felt an inexplicable heat in his ears. He glanced at that person, and after a moment he said, Close your eyes. Do I need to close my eyes? Yin, who arched a brow, thinking about this fellow's kissing experience. Do you close your eyes when kissing your ex-girlfriend? Lin Feng recalled the last time he scared this fellow, his gaze fluttering. Of course. Don't people close their eyes when kissing on TV? All right. There was a hint of unwillingness in Yin Hu's voice. He wasn't willing because if only his first kiss had been his as well. Lin Feng leaned forward again, but this time his ears felt even hotter. Why was Yin Hu still so strong even with his eyes closed? It must be because this fellow was too handsome. Lin Feng looked at the tall nose that was inches away from him. In the past, he had always been envious of Yin Hu's looks. He was the kind of man who had good looks and wasn't feminine at all, unlike him, who was naturally tender. When they were close enough, Lin Feng's gaze swept towards Yin Hu's lips. For some reason, his heart started racing, and he felt a little uncomfortable. Thinking about it carefully, who would kiss their brother of more than 20 years? Even when they fooled around, it wasn't like this. After all, they were both men. Lin Feng took a deep breath and said, Can I kiss your face? Yin Hu opened his eyes, watching Lin Feng's expression. Even though he had concealed his emotions, this fellow had never been an expert in terms of emotions. The slightest bit of unwillingness could be seen. Yin Hu's heart sank and he asked, Is it difficult to kiss? I really can't kiss you. Lin Feng hadn't finished the word go. His thin lips were blocked. Yin Hu liked to drink tea, and when he kissed, it was filled with his unique tea fragrance. There was also an indescribable feeling. Lin Feng froze on the spot, his eyes wide open. Yin Hu took the opportunity to pry open his lips, the tip of his tongue hooking upwards, not giving him a chance to catch his breath. How could a naive person like Lin Feng be Yin Hu's match in this aspect? Just as he was about to speak, Yunhu's kiss wrapped around him. The feeling of the tip of his tongue being sucked made him shudder. There was nothing left in his head, only a blank space. Lin Feng reached out, pushing him away. The back of his hand subconsciously rubbed his thin lips, the burning feeling still lingering. Yunhu, who was pushed away, sat up straight, glanced at him, his fingers brushing across his bitten lips. Lin Feng wanted to explain, after all, Yunhu had tried his best just now. It was hard for him to accept it psychologically. Unexpectedly, Yunhu spoke faster than him. It's nothing if you can't accept it now. Take it slow, one day you will be able to accept it. With that, he stood up, the fringe on his forehead blocking his eyes. I'm going to take a shower. Lin Feng opened his mouth, but in the end he didn't say anything. He sat on the bed and grabbed his hair. The shower was turned on. Yunhu stood below, the water droplets sliding down his straight back. That sentence wasn't meant for Lin Feng. It was better to say it to himself. He liked someone for too long. It was so long that he was afraid he would marry someone else one day. But with his grand appearance he would have to miss it, at the Fu family's house. Bo Jiu was still trying to guess what the Almighty was thinking. Qin Emo glanced at the time on his wrist, saying faintly, "Let's go after eating, we're going to meet the advertiser." Advertiser? Bo Jiu arched a brow. I have to meet him too? Qin Mo's side profile was very attractive. Isn't it good to let you earn some pocket money by filming advertisements? That's not bad, it proves that I rely on my looks to make a living. Bo Jiu smiled, her love for money was well known. Qin Emo watched as the youngster's eyes fell on the money. He didn't want to admit that he had fallen for her, to the point of being hopeless. If she wanted money, wouldn't it be better for him to be her boyfriend? He had never seen such an idiot before. Qin Emo lowered his gaze, glancing at the display on his phone. It was Feng Yi, the car had arrived 10 p.m. In the advertising studio. Due to the large amount of investors, there were many celebrities in the studio. Yi Sihua and his manager, who had tried to embarrass Bo Jiu at the gathering 2 days ago, were among them. These 2 days, Yi Sihua's popularity had soared. A popular youth idol drama had helped him gain a lot of fans. But that wasn't the reason for the rise in popularity. The real reason why his value had skyrocketed was because he had appeared on the casting list of an international director, William. Everyone knew that anyone who could show their face in such a blockbuster would have a different meaning in the industry. But Yi Sihua was difficult to negotiate with. The advertiser had already given him a persona. They felt that it wasn't outstanding enough and insisted on 2 more scenes. This advertisement was different from the others. The Chinese director had wanted to film a microfilm advertisement. After all, he was in the electronics industry. But he was just a pretty face, no one would believe him if he claimed to have acted before. He felt that adding 2 more scenes would ruin the beauty. Both parties couldn't hold on. Yi Sihua looked as though he was the big shot, and if they didn't please him, he wouldn't be able to negotiate. The Chinese director had a unique personality, placing the camera over, a smile on her lips as she answered the call. Teacher? Are you coming over? It would be great if you could come over. You can help me control the scene. After she hung up, the big shot, who had been spoiled by his fans, was still wearing his sunglasses, looking high and mighty. The Chinese director thought to herself, the rumored fresh meat had good looks and acting skills. He even respected the staff. That must be **T. Our condition is still the same. Our Sihua's face can't be flashed across the screen. The manager had her considerations. After all, the status of the artiste under her was different now. She had to have some demands. The Chinese director couldn't convince them, and was about to walk over to say something. Just then, a voice came from the other side. He's so handsome. Why are young Master Qin and Big Spade here? I can't believe it. Oh my god, I'm satisfied. Big Spade. A professional esports player, the silver-haired handsome youngster. I thought he was cosplaying. How could he be so handsome in real life? The discussion heated up as the 2 of them walked in. Even the Chinese director looked over curiously. He wouldn't have known if he didn't look, but his eyes lit up the moment he saw it. This was exactly the kind of character that she wanted the most. A laptop advertisement. The theme was mysterious and beautiful. What she wanted to do was to tell a short story with a visual sense. Hence, she had asked the manufacturer to find a couple for her. Even if they weren't a couple, they had to be young and handsome. Handsome didn't have to be rigid. It had to have a unique charm, and it would be best if they weren't bad at computer games. Now, looking at the two of them, the Chinese director only had one thought. It didn't matter if they didn't know how to computer games, as long as they could pose properly, reveal their faces, and add a little expression, it would be perfect. Who are they? The Chinese director had just returned from overseas, pulling a staff over to ask. The staff had an incredulous expression. Young Master Qin and Spadesy. They are the professional esports players who replaced the previous couple. The advertiser got them from their manager, but they only agreed to show their faces. They just arrived. The Chinese director's heart blossomed when she heard the staff's words. She had to make the best use of the actors. Arrange for their makeup and clothes. Makeup was fine, but Qin Emo wouldn't allow anyone to touch her. Fortunately, they were in a filming studio and the environment wasn't bad. Bojo took the clothes from the staff and smiled faintly. Thank you, I can do it myself. The staff didn't know how to play games and didn't watch esports competitions. But when she saw the youngster's handsome face and thanked her, she couldn't help blushing. She finally understood why so many people were infatuated with this youngster. Even though he was in the esports industry, his popularity was high. He was really handsome. He wasn't just handsome, his gaze was gentle as well. There were many handsome men and beautiful women in the esports industry. But there weren't many people like this youngster who exuded an aura as pure as jade. From afar, Isihua narrowed his eyes, his face darkening. Why is that useless Fu family here? The manager wasn't sure either. I'll go ask. It's fine. Isihua's expression darkened. With young Master Qin by his side, it wouldn't be strange for him to go anywhere. Go ask the director when they are filming. All right. The manager didn't want to provoke young Master Qin, since they couldn't wait to fawn over him. Isihua was still looking at the staff. Why would she give the clothes to that useless person? Was he here to film an advertisement? Isihua's eyes dimmed. The staff was still standing outside the changing room. There were two changing rooms. Bojo went to one while Qin Emo went to the other. The staff paced back and forth, hoping to catch a glimpse of the youngster after she changed her clothes. After about 3 minutes, Bojo walked out. Actually, this was what she usually wore when she was at the Fifth Avenue. He was wearing a white shirt, a black trench coat, a long tie, and a pure black mask on his face. This was to reduce his presence. Unexpectedly, the clothes for the advertisement were the same. Bojo arched a brow, reaching out to loosen her tie. The Chinese director and the staff were dazzled by her handsomeness. Chapter 955. The Chinese director's eyes lit up. She couldn't wait to get the cameraman to start the shoot. This was the male lead in her heart. How could someone be so perfect? Even with the mask, it couldn't hide the superstar aura he exuded. When the Chinese director had first seen the youngster, she had felt that he looked too clean and pure. Perhaps he wouldn't be able to bring out the mysterious effect. Unexpectedly, as compared to the previous set of clothes, the black trench coat and mask were more suitable for him. The moment Bojo came out, she was stared at by the two girls. Usually, she had a strong tolerance, but today, she was being stared at for a long time. She paused for a moment before asking, "May I ask, what kind of advertisement are we shooting?" Ah. The stage supervisor snapped back to her senses, and was about to speak. Qin Emo pushed the door open and walked out, silencing the entire set once more. Some people, regardless of what they wore, would be able to bring out their unique aura. Noble, indifferent porcelain white skin. This was everyone's first impression of Qin Emo. At this moment, Qin Emo was wearing a white shirt, holding a can of beer in his hand. His collar was half open. He had wet his hair for the styling. Black strands of hair scattered across his forehead, water droplets sliding down the bridge of his nose. He looked casual and sexy. So handsome. Someone sucked in a sharp breath. Bojo turned, looking at the person. She was met with a pair of deep eyes. The moment Qin Emo saw her, the color of his eyes deepened. They were separated by half the studio, one in the light and the other in the dark. Bojio was still wearing the mask. In that instant, her heart skipped a beat. It was because she suddenly remembered something. The Almighty had seen her at Fifth Avenue, even though it had just been a brush. But back then, she had been wearing a black trench coat with a hood and a black mask. Other than the color of her hair, she had looked exactly the same as now. Bojio wasn't sure if the Almighty would remember the time they had brushed shoulders when he saw her in this state. For some reason, she felt a little guilty. She tilted her head and prayed in her heart, "Don't remember, don't remember." Just as she was thinking about this, a person appeared in front of her. That person enveloped her on the spot. It could be said that she bumped into that person's arms. When the tip of his nose touched the white shirt, he let out a long sigh. Just like this, it didn't seem like he didn't recognize him at all. "You don't even know how to walk." A melodious voice sounded from above. Bojio glanced up and touched the bridge of her nose. Chin Emo studied the youngster's face, especially when his gaze swept over her masked face. His voice was faint, a little nonchalant. "In the past, when I went to America to play, I bumped into someone who looked like you." Bojio's left hand, which was in her pocket, paused. When she smiled, her eyes were sincere. "I'm so handsome. How can there be someone like me? I really want to meet him." When she heard the code name, Bojio tilted her head. Through the mask she asked, "What?" "The person I bumped into in America was Z." Chinmo's side profile remained emotionless. Bojio paused, widening her eyes. With the mask on, she looked extremely innocent. "Brother Emo, you mean that I look like Z?" Chinmo's thin lips lifted. He paused and leaned forward, whispering into her ear, "It's a pity that you aren't an actor." Bojio's heart sank, but the corners of her eyes lifted. She looked mischievous. "It's indeed a waste of my good looks if I don't act. In such a public event, there would definitely be many people looking over." Bojio could hear the commotion around her, but it probably wouldn't affect the Almighty much. But for the sake of Feng Yi, she had to remind the Almighty, "Brother Emo, this is a filming studio." She meant for him to restrain himself. Otherwise, Manager Feng would have to go out to drink and explain. It would be rather pitiful. With that, Chin Emo pinched Bojio's chin. He didn't kiss her, but that position wasn't any different from a kiss. "It seems like we have to talk again tonight." Because of Chin Mo's domineering action, the Chinese director was inspired again. His eyes were as bright as the headlights of a car. Bojio had no choice but to push him away. "Brother Emo, there's someone else." At this moment, Manager Feng was almost in tears. "Little Spade, it wasn't a waste for me to dote on you. When young Master Chin was showing off his love, you even helped me hold him back." Come. Feng Yi pulled Bojio's arm decisively, moving her to the side. When he did this, he braced himself to do it. It was mainly because of the coldness emanating from Chin Mo's eyes. His presence was too strong. He really didn't know how Little Spade could withstand such a strong aura. At the end of the day, Little Spade was thick-skinned. The Chinese director was in the best mood. "I suddenly have a good idea. Hurry, set up the scene at the side." Yi Sihua, who had been neglected, was now as dark as the clouds in the sky. After all, he was a popular movie star. What was wrong with this director? Did he really think that a gamer would be more popular than him? Yi Sihua had to admit that things would be different with young Master Chin's participation. Hence, even if it was a commercial, it would be a commercial for him and young Master Chin. That useless Fu family would only bring down his standards. Besides, even if he could play the piano, he wouldn't be presentable. Filming a commercial wasn't easy. It was about not being stiff, being able to look at the camera and having some acting skills. Did that useless thing? "We are in a rush to finish the film. Everyone hurry up," the Chinese director said as he glanced at Yi Sihua, who was still seated in the corner. Yi Sihua wasn't stupid. He knew it wouldn't be good for either of them if it dragged on. He stood up and spoke to his manager. The manager nodded and walked towards Feng Yi. Coincidentally, the Chinese director was there too. The manager's attitude was different now. He smiled and said, "If we knew that young Master Chin would be appearing in the commercial, Our Sihua would have agreed long ago. It seems like it's fate. Director Lee, when can we start filming? Even though the Chinese director had just returned from overseas, he was still in the same industry. One look at his manager was enough to tell what kind of person he was. She picked up the script she had written for the scene, her tone calm. Change your clothes and read the script. Lee Sihua watched from the side. Didn't this little director know that the industry was small? With such an attitude, didn't he know that the industry was small? The manager knew that Lee Sihua wasn't in a good mood. When she walked back, she whispered something in Lee Sihua's ear, reminding him to restrain himself with young Master Qin around. Of course I know, don't worry. Lee Sihua licked his lips, his eyes dimming. I'll deal with this director in the future. As for the person who gave up gaming and insisted on filming a commercial, I'll let him know the difference between us. The manager was still worried. He came with young Master Qin Yu. I won't do anything on the surface. Lee Sihua laughed sinisterly. Don't forget, this commercial has a storyline and there are 3 main characters. Since he is so desperate to prove himself, I'll let him know that it isn't easy to be a main character. The manager's eyes widened. You mean to suppress the scene? Suppressing the scene was a term used in the industry. In the beginning, when experienced actors with good acting skills wanted to teach some fresh meat a lesson, they would occasionally use this trick. After all, there were some who didn't even fulfill their role as an actor. They didn't memorize their lines and went around taking part in variety shows, dragging down the production. In the end, some of the more scheming celebrities used suppressing the scene to plot against each other, especially when 2 people with similar reputations were together. In order to enhance their image, they would use suppressing the scene. But the manager hadn't expected Lee Sihua to use such a tactic on someone who had never acted before. Why? You don't like it? Lee Sihua glanced at him, his words going straight to the point. Don't forget, there are 3 people in this commercial. The best way to make everyone think I'm the spokesperson is to stand out. The manager nodded in agreement, giving him a thumbs up. On the other side, Bojio was already seated in the makeup room. Her lids lowered as she flipped through the script she had written on the spot. At the same time, she was trying to think of a way to escape the conversation with the Almighty. The makeup artist was having a hard time with her. Her eyelashes were black and long, there wasn't a need for makeup. She could use some eyeliner to enhance the depth of her features. That would be more in line with the character in the script. But as for the rest, the makeup artist caressed her smooth and fair face, praising sincerely. Your skin is so good, you don't need to put on foundation. If too many things were applied to this face, it would ruin its original handsomeness. Now that he had brought out a spy, he really looked like the main character of a Korean drama. The Chinese director was getting impatient, asking Bojio, have you found the feeling? When Bojio received the script, she didn't know what to say. It was about a hacker. She didn't need to find the feeling. The Chinese director noticed the youngster's silence, assuming that he was nervous because he hadn't been in this industry before. Hence he softened his tone. Don't worry, just act naturally. Even if you can't find the feeling, your face is more than enough. Come, stand back a little. The Chinese director walked to the side, making space for everyone. He raised the loudspeaker, his eyes bright as he shouted, everyone get ready. First scene, action. Swoosh. The lights in the studio were all dimmed. It was the layout of a billiard hall. The light that shone down was a little dim. However, the slender figure standing beside the billiard table wasn't dim at all. That wasn't all. When the light shone down, it seemed as though he was tall and slender. He stood there casually with a laptop in front of him. He seemed to be a little bored. He hooked his index finger, opened the can, and for some reason the corner of his mouth curled up. The girls were going crazy as they watched from the side. I finally understand why everyone says that young Master Qin is the prettiest in Jiang City. He's so handsome. I'm so envious of young Master Qin's future girlfriend. She can look at his face every day. And his figure, young Master Qin is a walking clothes rack. I can't take it anymore, my nose is going to bleed. The girl said that because just as Qin Mo was about to raise his head to take a sip of the ice-cold beer, his eyes seemed to have seen something. He turned towards the door. The camera panned in that direction as well. A young man in a black trench coat walked in from the door. He was probably in the middle of a run. As he was a little thin, he wore a black mask, which made his eyes look very black and bright. His entire person seemed to have been drawn with a line pen. The black and white were distinct, and in an instant, he caught the entire camera. At this moment, Isihua was there too. He was also one of them, playing with a black tablet in his hands. His eyes were fixed on the youngster who was walking over. He had wanted to portray an indifferent person, but to add to his acting, Isihua stood in front of Bojio, his voice cold and aloof. "I heard your skills aren't bad. Want to play a game?" It was a last-minute change of script, but since the scene wasn't too bad, the Chinese director didn't ask for a pause. The moment she had seen Bojio, she had probably forgotten that he wasn't an actor, and had only wanted to continue filming. Bojio was still wearing the black mask, her hands stuffed into the pockets of her trench coat. She didn't even glance at Isihua, replying through the mask, "I'm not interested." The Chinese director felt that the youngster's performance was perfect. The youngster's performance was more in line with the character she wanted to portray, bringing the character to life. Isihua would never have expected the trash to perform so well in front of the camera. Initially, he had wanted to use his impromptu acting skills to silence the youngster. It would be best if there were more NGs. But now, because of the youngster's reply, the camera swept past him, focusing on the youngster. Anyone who knew how to act would know that Isihua was the one who was being suppressed, and it was a harsh suppression. But Bojio couldn't be blamed. She hadn't been interested in this person. Besides, he had changed his script at the last minute. Everything Bojio did was a natural reaction. After all, she knew that the person she was facing was the Almighty, who was standing at the side of the billiards hall. In the camera, the youngster had already passed Isihua, placing the thin laptop on the table and starting to type. Bojio's typing speed had always been fast. Chapter 956. How could there be someone who could move so quickly? Also, the innate sense of being in the camera. Every single detail shocked everyone in the photography team. It was just an advertisement, but it made them want to continue watching. It wasn't just because of the storyline, but also because of the strange tension between the youngster and young Master Qin. The Chinese director didn't forget his mission in the midst of his shock, shifting the camera to the youngster's notebook. There was a huge close-up, especially the bright silver logo, which matched the youngster's hair color. The shot took 3 seconds. The next second, the scene changed. Someone reached out to support the youngster's side across the billiard table. His slender figure lowered, his nose bridge high, his lips thin and his eyes dark. He looked like a flirt. But he didn't even glance at the back of the beauties around him. Instead, he stared at the youngster, his sexy lips lifting into a faint smile. That person wasn't anyone else. It was Qin Mo. Bojio glanced up, their gazes meeting. In that instant, the cover of the notebook was extremely clear. The tension between the two of them became even more obvious. Even though there was hostility in their eyes, when their faces came close, there was an extra hint of ambiguity that made it hard for people to look away. Were they really not a couple? This was the thought in everyone's mind. Some were impressed by the director for coming up with such a scene. This advertisement would definitely be popular. Just based on this scene, no one would ignore the notebook between the two of them. Isihua had an extra second of footage, but his gaze wasn't on him. Instead, after Qin Mo spoke, everyone's gaze was focused on him. "Who are you?" That was Qin Mo's line. It was a short 3 words, but because of his actions and the way he looked at the youngster's thin lips, it was extremely alluring. Bojio stood up, walking past the billiard table and picking up a cue stick. When the youngster was doing this, she lifted her trench coat and removed it with one hand. Then she picked up the cue stick and lowered her body, aiming it at the colored ball on the table. A loud swoosh. The colored ball bypassed the half-open silver notebook and landed in the middle of the net. Just the sound alone was enough to tell that it was a beautiful shot. At this moment, there was an uproar in the studio. Worried that it would affect the filming, everyone covered their mouths as they turned towards her. He was too handsome. The Chinese director felt a little dizzy from the shock again. He quickly moved the camera to capture the scene. When the youth was playing, his shirt was pulled up, revealing a fair jade-like skin. That curve was astonishingly beautiful. Chinmo's gaze seemed to have stopped there as well. It was dark and deep to the extreme. The youngster retracted her cue and picked up her coat from the billiard table. She casually draped it over her shoulder and smiled devilishly. Why should I tell you? What followed was the young man's carefree back view. Chinmo stood there, looking at the back view like a devil. He pressed his fingers on the notebook and closed it gently. His thin lips curved slightly and he laughed playfully. Heh. Finally, the screen stopped at the notebook. Apart from the notebook's logo, there was only a line of words. Unfinished, to be continued. Gotcha. It signaled the end of the shoot. The Chinese director was the first to stand up and clap. The others couldn't hold it in any longer. Previously, they had been afraid to disturb the two of them, but now, everyone stood up and let out a heartfelt exclamation. After all, even a professional actor wouldn't be able to complete the shoot in one take. More importantly, filming this commercial didn't just require the other party to type fast. The scene just now was also a test of their skills. The photography team had originally wanted to use these things for post-production. Who would have expected that Spadesy didn't just do it? He was so handsome that he could turn the commercial into a movie. This wasn't something that could be done easily. The atmosphere in the studio was unprecedentedly intense. When Bojio walked back, the crew were all looking at her like a fangirl. As for Isihua's whereabouts, no one cared anymore. His face was completely sunken. He wanted to flare up, but he didn't dare. He could only suppress his anger. He didn't want to watch the commercial anymore. He didn't even need to watch it to know that the scene just now had been a deliberate attempt by that useless person to humiliate him. Isihua's popularity had been suppressed. Of course, he wasn't in a good mood. He threw his jacket aside and left with his manager. When he left, his mood wasn't quite right. Of course, the staff in the studio could see it. But so what? Anyone who saw the scene just now would know that Isihua was up to no good. A professional actor was bullying someone who had never acted before. In the end, he had been suppressed. It was an awkward slap to his face. Isihua was still hoping that someone in the studio would ask him to stay. After he walked out, he asked his manager, "Did anyone follow me?" His manager shook his head in embarrassment. Isihua raised his leg and kicked the bin beside him. "What is that?" His manager hurriedly consoled him. "It's just a commercial and the director is a newcomer. Even if young Master Chin is around, it won't have much commercial value. You are one of the candidates that Director William admires. This is nothing." After hearing his consolation, Isihua's anger subsided a little. "Go and find out where the director is from. He's so disrespectful, he might as well stop filming." "I know what you mean. I'll ask him now." As the agent spoke, she turned on her cell phone and dialed a familiar number. Reporter Lee. "Listen to what you're saying. I don't have anything to reveal to you. However, there's someone I want to ask about for this shoot." After hearing the manager's words, the person on the other end of the line replied faintly. The manager's expression changed completely. Isihua couldn't hear the conversation and could only look at his face. He frowned impatiently. What did he say? Where did the director come from? The agent's hand that was holding the phone slowly lowered as he muttered, "Director William." Isihua replied, "I'm asking you where the director came from. Why are you mentioning Director William?" The manager's face was pale. He glanced up at Isihua. "She followed Director William back to China. She is his only disciple." Instantly, Isihua's expression changed. Even his lips stiffened. He wanted to go back, but there was no way for him to do so. After all, he had left in a fit of anger. It would only embarrass him if he went back. But how did the director become Director William's disciple? Isihua was about to go crazy, anger and embarrassment surging through him. The manager was afraid he would do something else, hence he pulled him into the nanny van. The manager knew that this wasn't just a commercial they had lost. They were afraid of losing even more. The atmosphere in the studio remained the same. No one noticed that in an inconspicuous corner, a foreigner had been watching for a long time. A foreigner had been sitting there watching for a long time. Beside him was an assistant. Ever since the cameras had started, he had been sitting there, his gaze following Bojio's every movement. At this moment, he only had one thought in his mind. Even if this person had a bad reputation, the young hacker in his movie had to be played by him. Did you see the expression on the youngster's face when he was typing and playing the ball? He is the person we are looking for. Old William couldn't be blamed for his agitation. He had seen many profiles, but none of them were as stunning as the youngster every time they met. He fits the role perfectly, be it in terms of looks or personality. He is perfect. He has to be the one. He has to be the one. When old William reached the end of his sentence, he could not help but stand up. Bojio had already changed her clothes and was walking out of the studio. Chinemo didn't leave because he had something to discuss. Bojio wanted to buy some medicine. As long as she took the medicine within 24 hours, she would be fine. When she left, Bojio took the black mask from the filming crew. She wore it and was about to cross the traffic light. Wait a minute. The person who spoke wasn't very fluent in Chinese, because the two words that came out of his mouth carried a unique accent of a foreigner. Bojio turned towards the direction of the voice. The person who stopped her was a middle-aged foreigner. He was dressed in a traditional Chinese tunic suit, which made him look elegant. For a foreigner, to be elegant, this person's experience would not be very low. I saw your advertisement just now. Are you interested in acting in the movie? Old William asked directly. He didn't care what stupid conditions the youngster had to come up with in order to become famous. As long as he could maintain the state he had been in during the advertisement, he would agree. After all, perfection in the movie was the most important. However, he hadn't expected the youngster to reply. The youth only gave him 2 words. No. His tone was calm and emotionless. The youngster seemed to be in a hurry as he walked towards the opposite direction. Old William stilled for a moment before blurting out. I don't think you know who I am. You should have heard of Hollywood. The youngster paused, arching a brow. I don't care who you are. I'm not interested in acting in the movie. Old William hadn't expected such an answer. Hadn't he always wanted to be famous? Acting in a movie will bring you more attention than playing esports. Old William felt that it wasn't logical. That's not what I meant. I meant that you are a natural actor. Are you sure you don't want to try? I don't want to. Bojio wanted to buy some medicine. Once the Almighty was done, she might not have the chance to buy it. Old William stilled once more. This was the first time he wanted someone to act in his movie, but she wasn't interested at all. But you acted well just now. Why don't you want to act? Bojio watched as the foreigner followed her. She didn't care anymore and crossed the traffic light. No reason. The assistant next to him was a little surprised to see this. Over the years, no one had ever rejected the olive branch that director William had extended to them. He was a director who created stars. As long as the main character acted in his movie, even if they weren't popular before, they would be known quickly and become a superstar. Everyone had to admit that he was a world-class director. The movies he produced were equally shocking. Many Chinese celebrities wished they could be the lucky ones when they heard that director William was going to cast them. But this youngster... The assistant walked over and whispered something to her. Bojio arched a brow. The assistant smiled. You have to introduce yourself before you start the discussion. Director William really thinks that you fit the image of an actor in his mind. Do you want to reconsider? No, Bojio replied without hesitation. She had the cheekiness of a youngster. I have something to do. Since you are an international celebrity, you shouldn't keep following me. You might get photographed. The assistant had thought that everything would be resolved if she mentioned Director William's name. But from the looks of it, the youngster didn't seem to have any intention of acting. The assistant turned to look at his boss. The information we received wasn't accurate. If the youngster really wants to be famous, he wouldn't have rejected such a good opportunity. Director William was aware of this, but he could see the youngster's attitude. He wasn't moved at all. He started to panic. Think about it. Who would be able to invite this youngster? Isn't he filming a commercial today? The assistant took a moment before replying. We have to contact Movie Queen, and Director William replied. Hurry up, it would be best if we can have a meal together. MMH. After all, no one had expected to be rejected. If the media were to find out, it would definitely be a hot topic. William didn't care as long as he could invite the youngster into his movie. In the studio, Chin Mo was done with his discussion. He glanced over and asked the assistant, "Where's young Master Gio?" The agent took a long time before realizing that young Master Gio was referring to Big Spade. At such a close distance, he blushed slightly. "Ah, Big Spade asked me about the nearby pharmacy. He must have gone out to buy some medicine." "Buy medicine?" Chin Mo furrowed his brows. The assistant replied, "Yes, he must have gone out to buy flu medicine. It's easy to catch a cold in this weather." "Where's the pharmacy?" Chin Mo had always been cold and polite to strangers. But even so, the girl was still a little incoherent because she had such a long conversation with Almighty Chin. She said, "It's right across the studio, just past the traffic light. It's very easy to recognize." Chapter 957. Bojio wasn't familiar with birth control pills, but she knew it was better to keep a low profile when buying such pills. There weren't many people in the pharmacy, just a few scattered around. Fortunately, they were all elderly aunties. If it was an ordinary young lady and someone recognized her, the situation would definitely be bad. She didn't mind, but manager phone would probably go crazy. It was better not to have news of esports players buying birth control pills. Bojio wore a mask. She looked around but couldn't find what she was looking for. The medicine probably couldn't be placed on the counter, hence, she couldn't find it on the medicine rack. It seemed like she would have to ask the pharmacist. Bojio sighed inwardly as she walked towards the counter. "Hi, get me a box of birth control pills." The doctor standing at the counter glanced up at Bojio. "Which brand do you want?" There was a brand? For the first time, Bojio felt she wasn't cultured enough. She chose a conservative answer. "I'll take whichever brand has the best effect." However, it was this answer that made the shopping guide shake his head and murmur, "Young people nowadays are really..." Bojio wasn't young in her heart, but she hadn't come into contact with such things in her previous life. If it wasn't for the lack of time, she would have wanted to bring the Almighty's child back to the Fifth Avenue. But now, Bojio clenched her fists. This was the only way. A total of 25. Cash or Alipay? The pharmacist glanced over, scanning the barcode. Bojio felt that it wasn't a good time to use her phone. She reached into her pockets but didn't bring any cash. In the end, she inhaled deeply and used her phone. "Is WeChat okay?" "Yes." The pharmacist's expression didn't change. Bojio whipped out her phone. The moment she unlocked the screen, she received a message. It was from the Almighty with only 2 words. "Where are you?" Bojio glanced at the image of the cartoon. She hesitated for a moment, but didn't reply. Instead, she opened the payment function. The pharmacist scanned the barcode and passed the medicine to her. Bojio lowered her gaze, her silver hair covering her face as she took the medicine. Suddenly, a deep and familiar voice rang out from above her head. "Shouldn't you explain what you're doing?" Bojio's back stiffened. She only had one hope in her heart, that the Almighty was like her, lacking knowledge in certain areas. The hand that was holding the medicine paused for a moment. Then Bojio quickly stuffed the medicine into her pocket. Even her gaming speed wasn't as fast as it was now. After she was done, Bojio glanced over, meeting Chin Mo's icy gaze behind her. She had never seen an Almighty like this. His deep eyes were extremely deep. Before she could say anything, Chin Mo had already reached out and pulled out the wrist that the youngster had stuffed into his pocket. His voice was as indifferent as the storm before the storm. "What is this?" Bojio opened her mouth, her throat moving. "Medicine." "What medicine?" Chin Mo's handsome face didn't show any emotion, but the cold aura he exuded could freeze the surroundings. Bojio didn't reply because she didn't know how to explain. Chin Mo glanced at the 2 words "Yuding." He wanted to crush the person in front of him and swallow her into his stomach. That way, she would know who exactly she belonged to. That way, she wouldn't have come to buy this medicine. If that was the case, she wouldn't be thinking of leaving even now. Chin Mo lowered his body, taking the medicine from Bojio's hands. Bojo watched as the medicine slowly deformed in his hands. It seemed as though he wanted to destroy it. But the Almighty's emotions didn't change. Because of this, Bojo knew that he was really angry. Chinemo lowered his lids, clutching the box of medicine in his palms. With a voice that he had never used before, he said, "I asked you to wait at the same spot, but you never waited. Just like at night, when I sleep, I would think about what that arrogant little Gio is doing. I want to wake up earlier so that I can see her earlier. It's the first time I want to kiss someone, but I can't do it. You probably don't understand this feeling at all. That's why you bought this medicine here." Bojo wanted to say something. But the Almighty seemed to be listening to her explanation. "Do you think I'm illiterate, or that I don't recognize this brand? Since you don't want to be together, let's break up." After saying that, the Almighty only gave her a distant view of his back. Bojo had seen that back view way too many times before she had gotten close to the Almighty. But there had never been a time like this, when she couldn't breathe. She wasn't sure when it started to rain. When Bojo walked out, the Almighty was nowhere to be seen. He must have been picked up by the Chin family's car. Bojo clenched her fists, her gaze sinking. She stood in the rain, her hair slightly damp. Her back was still straight, but it had never been as listless as it was today. She was like a little tiger that had been caught in the rain and didn't know how to warm herself up. Perhaps because the person who could warm her up had left, she didn't care about the water splashing on her. That was how Fengyi saw her when he rushed over. From what he could remember, the devilish youngster had never been like this. Had they quarreled? That was Fengyi's first reaction. Where was Boss Qin? He glanced left and right, unable to find him. Fengyi was almost certain that they had quarreled. He reached out to press down on his brows. His head started to hurt. If even little Spade was like this, he could almost imagine young Master Qin being in a bad mood, and how low his aura would be for the entire day. He guessed that the managers of the various departments would be having a tough time. But how did they end up in such a state? With young Master Qin's personality, even if he was angry, he would have taken little Spade away to teach her a lesson. Why did he leave her here? Fengyi frowned, bringing Bojo into the car. It wasn't good to be drenched like this. He tried to communicate with the youngster. "Weren't you fine just now? How did you end up like this after buying some medicine?" Bojo glanced out of the window, the rainwater trailing down the ends of her silver hair. She didn't care, her handsome face tilted to the side, hiding her expression. Her mind was still ringing with that sentence. "Since you don't want to be together, let's break up." Breaking up was only a matter of time. She had no choice but to reject it. She had overestimated her tolerance. Just a few words could affect her to such an extent. If she waited until the Almighty found out about her identity, he would frown and look at her in disgust. She probably wouldn't be able to take it. Bojo reached out to press her fringe down. When her phone rang, her voice was slightly hoarse. "Hello." It was a call from the school. Bojo's boarding application had been approved, and the school had asked her to bring her luggage over. Even if she still had to participate in the competition, she still had to follow the school's basic procedures. In reality, Bojo wasn't in the mood to think about what the other party had said. But she could do something to distract her. If she stayed in the school, it wouldn't be too abrupt when she left. Bojo had been stalling for time. She understood all too well that no one would feel good when someone suddenly disappeared. But if everyone knew that the person beside them was an international criminal, He Honghua would probably be frightened. She didn't want to see that. This time, she had used her identity to return, which meant that some people were already aware of her return. Among them, there would be people who wanted her dead. If they found out about her identity, He Honghua would be in danger. Hence, she had to leave. Just like back then, even if she didn't want to leave her puppy without saying goodbye, she still had to leave. Bojo still remembered that night. After she had climbed onto the balcony, she had used a lot of strength to enter his room. In order to prevent her from attacking him at night, he had always placed some flowers and plants on the balcony. At that time, she hadn't cared about those things. After sneaking into the room, she had looked at him sleeping on the bed and leaned over to kiss his face. She thought that she might as well carry him away. She was strong anyway. But Bojo knew that her puppy wouldn't leave with her. He had his own things to do in his own family. It would be boring to watch her typing every day. And he would meet with danger. Just as her father had said, it wasn't suitable for the young lord of the hacker world to have friends around her. It was still raining outside. Droplets of rain fell on the car window. The Land Rover was very good at preventing rain, especially for military use. It was almost impossible to hear the sound of rain outside. But even so, the driver sitting in the driver's seat didn't dare to say anything at this time. Ever since his young master had entered the car, he had been sitting at the back without saying a word. Rainy days had always been his young master's taboo. Usually, his young master wouldn't go out at this time. This time, it was probably because young Master Gio was following him. Even though the weather wasn't good, his young master didn't seem to be uncomfortable. But now, where was young Master Gio? The driver didn't dare to ask this question because his young master's expression was unprecedentedly cold. Chin-mo didn't feel anything. From the start till the end, his left hand hadn't loosened. There was a box of medicine in his left hand. The box of medicine had been squeezed to a certain extent. Chin-mo's fingers were still the same as before, not softening in the slightest. If it wasn't for this box of medicine, perhaps he could have told himself. He was different in that fellow's heart. Even though that fellow had many secrets. In front of him, she would treat him sincerely and wouldn't reject being with him. But now that he thought about it, he was the one who said they wanted to be together. It could be said that he had forced her. In her heart, perhaps he wasn't that different. But he was wrong to think that she treated him the same way he treated her. That feeling was as though he had taken a step forward confidently, but didn't notice the steps in front of him. He missed his step and fell down with his head bleeding. The pain was unbearable. Chin-mo loosened his left hand and glanced at the car window. After the car reached the military courtyard, he remained in the same position. Movie Queen had just finished shopping with He Honghua. She had wanted to sit with Gio for a chat, but when she opened the car door, only her son was left. What was this? Movie Queen arched a brow and looked at her son's face. Chin-mo alighted from the car, not caring if there were any raindrops on him. He said faintly, "I'm tired, I'll head upstairs first." The intelligent Movie Queen quickly realized that there was a problem. She wanted to head upstairs to ask him but felt that as a parent, she shouldn't interfere with her child's relationship. After entering the room, Chin-mo acted as though nothing had happened. He unbuttoned his shirt and threw his clothes to the side before entering the bathroom. He allowed the water to splash on his head, as though he was trying to clear his head. Indeed, he was much more clear-headed. At the very least, he knew that person's true thoughts. In hindsight, what was so good about that person? She had never been willing to listen to him, much less take him seriously. When had he, Chin-mo, been so lowly? Chin-mo chuckled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. The coldness in his body didn't seem to be dissipating. Instead, it became thicker after he came out of the bathroom. He sat there, looking at his open laptop. His neck tilted back. Enough. It was indeed enough. But even though he said that, after Chin-mo came down from the stairs, Movie Queen noticed something different about her son. For example, he kept looking at his phone. He seemed to be waiting for someone's message. But when he saw the screen, his eyes dimmed again. When he finally received a message, it was from his secretary. "I'm going to the office." Chin-mo stood up. This was the first time he didn't want to have nothing to do. Time trickled by. Bo Gio was the last student to board the plane at number 1 middle school. The dormitory manager's expression wasn't any better. But she didn't make things difficult for him. The news of Bo Gio moving into the male dormitory spread through the entire number 1 middle school in an instant. Of course, it attracted many onlookers. Everyone in the dormitory would stop and glance at Bo Gio. After all, the school hunk staying in the dormitory wasn't something they could be happy about. Moreover, he was an esports star. How many girls would be attracted to him? They didn't have any hope in the future. But there were some who were optimistic. With Bo Gio here, things would be easier. For example, a photo of the school hunk for 5 yuan. No one knew that Bo Gio had chosen to move in today, because she didn't want to be alone. Chapter 958. The environment in the male dormitory could be described with 3 words: dirty, messy, and bad. Bojio carried her suitcase in. The person who was cooking instant noodles stilled. He hurriedly pulled out the plug and glanced to the side. It couldn't be. The school hunk was staying in our dormitory? There were 6 people in the dormitory, including Bojio. One of the other 5 was a thorny student from number 1 middle school. The thorny student laughed coldly. He still didn't like Bojio. He glanced to his left and right, intending to walk over in an imposing manner. But Bojio threw her suitcase up, stuffing one hand into her pocket. She was wearing her school uniform, her jacket half open. She stood sideways, looking as fierce as ever since she entered the school. Even her eyes were cold. "I'm not in a good mood today. Don't provoke me." The thorny student was even more displeased. Didn't she know there were rules in the dormitory? How dare she be so arrogant in his territory? What did she mean? "I say, do you still want to live?" Before the thorny student could finish his sentence, he reached out to grab the youngster's wrist. But the youngster twisted it cleanly. There was a loud bang. The thorny student was slightly dizzy from the fall. He glanced at the chandelier in the dormitory and shook his head. F***ck, why hadn't anyone told him that the top student was so good at fighting? Bojio lowered her lids. "First, I'm not in a good mood. Second, the one who provoked first is AB***tch. My patience is limited." The thorny student was really hurt. The one who cooked the noodles had always admired Bojio. Now that she was in such a state, he sighed. He hadn't expected the expert in the game to be so good in real life. The thorny student was convinced. He changed his attitude, and after he got up, he cleared a spot for Bojio, pouring her tea and water. Bojio sat on the only wooden chair in the dormitory. Her head hurt. She had never thought of being so domineering. But it seemed like she couldn't change her image anymore. "Boss, don't worry. No one would dare to provoke us in this building." The thorny student fanned her while gossiping. "But boss, why did you suddenly decide to stay in school? Shouldn't good students like you study at home?" Bojio glanced at him. "Based on what you're saying, those who stay on campus aren't good students? I want to experience life." "Experience life?" That thornhead let out a long sigh. He didn't really understand the world of a top student. When she spoke, she didn't forget to take in the surroundings. "I have a condition." "Conditional exchange?" The other 5 looked at each other. "Although I don't do homework, I can still solve some questions. I can help you solve your homework. Similarly, don't let these things appear in the dormitory." Bojio pointed at the dirty socks that were strewn all over the place. "There are also these. Besides, we are all hunks and should know the most basic etiquette. It's fine to take off your shirt since the weather is hot, but walking around in just your underwear is an eyesore. If you have a good figure, it might be worth looking at. If you don't, are you showing your bottom line?" The boy, who was only wearing a pair of underwear, inexplicably felt like he had been shot. However, since everyone was handsome, everyone in the dormitory agreed. Most importantly, there might be girls coming to visit in the future. Bojio stood at the window, glancing down at the girls who were pacing back and forth. She didn't doubt their offensive abilities. "Some of them will take pictures. You guys probably don't want to be caught in the most embarrassing scene. It isn't good to find a girlfriend like this." The moment Bojio finished her sentence, the boy in his underwear leaped into his bed. The boys who didn't care about their appearance changed their clothes and looked at themselves in the mirror. As the roommates of the school hunk, their looks had to be up to par. In the past, no girls had come to visit them. In the future, they would definitely be asked out by girls. From now on, they would have to take care of themselves. At first, the atmosphere was still all right. Suddenly someone said, "Young Master Gio is here. Will young Master Chin come to visit in the future? Will my favorite almighty Lin Feng come too?" Bojio didn't listen to what the person said. The 2 words, young Master Chin, seemed to have pierced a certain nerve. It wasn't painful, but the moment she thought about it, she became much quieter. "Think about it. The entire Supreme Alliance team will come to our dorm. Young Master Chin's arrival will definitely attract a huge crowd." The person was completely immersed in his own imagination. Bojio glanced up, her voice calm. He won't come. Ah. The people in the dorm were confused. Why did young Master Gio look like he had fallen out of love? No, they couldn't make wild guesses. In the past, they had thought that young Master Gio was definitely gay like the rumors said. But now, which gay was that strong? The rumors couldn't be trusted. But why did young Master Gio come to stay in the dorm? It was a mystery. Do you have a cigarette? Suddenly, the young man spoke again, interrupting his roommate's thoughts. Give me one. He even smoked? This didn't match their image of the top student in school. Second brother, watch the corridor. Howl when the hostel manager comes. The moment the Thornhead spoke, even the boy in underwear cooperated. Their efficiency was high. It was obvious that they had done such things often. Smoking had always been a group activity. It was normal for everyone to have a cigarette in the high school dorm. But it was hard for them to accept the fact that the school hunk smoked. Bojio didn't look at their shocked gazes. She tilted her head and lit the cigarette. She stood by the window, not wanting to move. Hey, don't you think the school hunk is a little listless? He looks completely different from when he beat me up. He's probably thinking about the competition. Didn't you see his cooperation with young Master Chin? It was amazing. Bojio turned at the mention of young Master Chin. Didn't I mention that I'm not in a good mood? You gave the entire dorm a show of strength the moment you entered. It was obvious you weren't in a good mood. But why? Do you want to know the reason? Bojio flicked the cigarette ash, her gaze deepening. The 5 roommates looked at the youngster, nodding in unison. Bojio glanced up, her voice cold. I was dumped by young Master Chin. Everyone. Didn't he say he wasn't gay? It was finally quiet. No one mentioned young Master Chin's name again. Bojio extinguished the cigarette and glanced at her phone screen. She hesitated for a long time, but didn't send the message. Her roommates didn't dare to talk about her situation since young Master Gio's martial arts skills were too strong. But young Master Gio was probably the only one who could be so handsome after falling out of love. Bojio's mood didn't change even after 2 consecutive cigarettes. She leaned against the wall. Even if she wasn't handsome, she was still listless. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. Her roommates felt that since their new boss was here, they had to celebrate. Do you want to go out for a meal? The big plate chicken at the school entrance is a must-have. Bojio glanced at them. Indeed, she wanted to go out for a walk. Staying here like this made her feel stifled. Let's go. Bojio extinguished the cigarette and walked out. There was a new scenery in number 1 middle school today. The other 5 walked in front. The youngster stuffed her hands into her pockets and followed behind. She wore a black mask and lowered her head to look at her phone. The girls passing by felt their hearts go out of control. Ever since Bojio joined the competition, she hadn't been to school much. Now that she was living in the dormitory, it became a benefit for the girls. The legendary Big Plate Chicken was just opposite the school. It was just a road away. Since it wasn't summer break yet, the weather wasn't particularly hot. Setting up a stall outside the shop and enjoying the natural breeze while eating was a form of enjoyment for the male high school students. Beer was a must. Since she didn't have any lessons today, she was just living in the school. Thorny took a bottle of beer. Just as he was about to pour half a glass for Bojio, the youngster took a bottle over. She bit down on it, opened the cap and gulped it down. The 5 roommates were stunned once more. They watched as the youngster drank without a change in expression. Their school hunk was indeed a ruthless character. They probably noticed that Bojio was looking at her phone. Someone couldn't help but ask, "Young Master Gio, what are you looking at? Why are you so engrossed?" Nothing. Bojio closed the WeChat page and took another sip of beer. That person didn't think there was anything interesting on the phone. He couldn't understand why young Master Gio was looking at an empty WeChat screen. This meal, Bojio didn't eat much. She just sat there and drank silently. Because it was by the side of the road, anyone who drove would be able to see it as long as they opened the windows. When she opened the 4th bottle of beer, Bojio paused. Bojio paused for a moment. It wasn't because of anything else, but because of the familiar military Land Rover that was driving over. The car plate was unique, and there was only one in the entire Jiang city. Bojio recognized the car, and so did her roommates. One of them blurted out, "Isn't that young Master Qin's car?" Only then did he realize something and shut his mouth. It was indeed a car Qin Mo often took. The windows weren't closed. They could clearly see that handsome and aloof face. The driver noticed them and paused for a moment. "Young Master, it's young Master Jio." Qin Mo glanced over at Bojio and said calmly, "Let's go." The driver was puzzled. Usually, young Master would ask young Master Jio to get in the car. But today, the roommates who were eating chicken were still thinking about young Master Qin's gaze. He must have looked over, but the next second, the Land Rover drove away. He turned back to look at the youngster's expression. Bojio didn't say anything. She retracted her gaze and ordered another bottle of beer. The roommates were dumbfounded. If they continued drinking, the lovelorn person would be fine, but all of them would collapse. Honestly, the school hunk was a little scary when he was lovelorn. On the other side, the Land Rover was still driving forward. It wasn't going fast. Firstly, the driver was still in shock. Secondly, his young master's gaze was on the rear-view mirror. He didn't urge him to drive faster. Instead, he seemed to be waiting for someone. Qin Mo was indeed waiting for someone. He glanced at the rear-view mirror, hoping to see the youngster chasing after him. But he didn't. He had glanced at his phone countless times today. He had told himself that as long as that person sent him a message, regardless of what was important to her, he would try not to be too domineering. Once again, reality hit him. That person didn't care about him at all. Feelings were similar to multiplication. As long as one side was zero, the result would be zero. Qin Mo tilted his head, his gaze lowered. The driver wasn't sure what his young master was thinking. He kept staring at the rearview mirror until they left the road. Then his gaze changed. However, it became even more lifeless. It was as though he had returned to the time when he had known young Master Jio. He wasn't interested in anything. His emotions were indifferent. His gaze was indifferent too. This kind of young master was really worrying. The scenery outside the car window retreated. Time trickled by. Bojio didn't continue drinking. She took out her wallet to settle the bill. She glanced at her roommate who was still vomiting in the corner. She stood there and lit another cigarette. She had never smoked so much before. Even when she was on her period, she would only smoke half a cigarette to relieve the pain. But it didn't seem right not to smoke. Perhaps she had never expected that person to treat her like an ordinary person, brushing past her with such an indifferent expression. Her heart tightened. This should be the lightest punishment. When the Almighty found out about her true identity, would he be 100 times colder? No one could predict it. She should do something else to stop herself from thinking about it. That way, it wouldn't be so boring. It would be more natural for them to meet again in the National League. Bojio knew that she wasn't being fair. But the Almighty might not know that he liked her in her high school facade. In reality, the real her wasn't that innocent. Underneath this facade, she was an international criminal. He had said that he would capture Z personally and send her to jail. Bojio didn't regret taking this path. But sometimes she would think that it would be great if that person could accompany her on this path. But Bojio knew that they were destined to walk different paths. Their methods were different. The Almighty followed the law, and she used her own methods. If it was possible, she hoped that in his heart, she would be the person he wanted to separate from and not a criminal. Qin Group Club. Numerous laptops were switched on at the same time. A meeting was being held in the meeting room. Anyone with eyes could see that Boss Qin's pressure was lower than any other day. It was probably too low. He wasn't even paying attention during the meeting. But to them, it wasn't that bad. Other than the slight fear, everything else was fine. The moment the words "meeting" ended were heard, the managers fled the scene hurriedly. Fengyi had wanted to talk to him about Little Spade, but from the looks of it, anyone who mentioned that name wouldn't have a good ending. Chapter 959. Qin Mo still remembered when he received this lighter. He couldn't wait to hold it in his hand and play with it several times. He couldn't get enough of it and liked it no matter how much he looked at it. He didn't want anyone else to touch it except him, so he always carried it with him. Chin Emo knew very well that the girl didn't know what day it was. From her wandering eyes, it could be seen that she had forgotten everything, and her guilty conscience could be seen. The next day, she gave him such a thing. It was because the girl was the one who gave him the lighter that he couldn't bear to part with it. But at the end of the day, he had used some tricks to get this gift from her. Chin Mo's fingers tightened, and his eyes deepened. Captain. Coco had just finished a live broadcast, and was still wearing his uniform. He wanted to take advantage of the break to come in to rest and seek comfort from his captain. As the person who carried the external publicity of the entire team, Coco would sometimes appear in the company. But he hadn't seen Manager Feng today, so he didn't know how Chin Emo was feeling today. After hearing the sound, Chin Emo glanced sideways. Coco sat on the sofa, his tiger teeth exposed. He reached out and tugged at his shirt. Captain, next time when you answer questions in the live broadcast, you and Little Spade should go. 80% of the people are asking me if you are really together. I said you are brothers, but they didn't believe me. I'm not good at lying, so I almost exposed you. Coco spoke for a while. Seeing that his captain didn't even look at him, he hopped over, holding a bag of yogurt in his mouth and looking at Chin Emo. The captain didn't even look at him. He was holding something in his hand. Coco looked for a while. He really didn't understand what was so good about this little thing. Why would the captain look at it for so long? After drinking the yogurt, Coco threw the bag away and asked curiously, Captain, what is this? Coco's question seemed to finally pull Chin Mo's eyes back. Lighter. Chin Mo's voice was very calm, as if the thing in his hand was nothing special. Coco widened his eyes. This is a lighter? This shape? It looks good. Where did you buy it? Chin Emo remained silent. But even so, Coco didn't notice that his captain was in a bad mood. He continued to look at the pure silver lighter. The more he looked, the more he liked it. Let me try lighting a cigarette? Why are you lighting a cigarette? Chin Emo arched a brow and threw the cigarette lighter to the side. Such an ugly thing. Ugly. Coco looked at his captain's side profile. There was no emotion on it. The naive Coco thought that his captain simply didn't like the igniter. Captain, if you think it's ugly, give it to me. I think it looks good. When Chin Emo heard that, he lifted his eyes and glanced at Coco. Her gaze was so cold that Coco's scalp went numb. He thought he had said something wrong, and his left hand felt like it was frozen. What did the captain mean? He had already said that it was ugly. Doesn't that mean I don't like it? Why was she looking at him as if she wanted to chop off his hand in the next second? Just when Coco thought that the captain would say something to him, Coco's eyes widened. A cold and indifferent voice rang out again. Up to you. Up to you? Did the captain mean that he could take the lighter away? But that wasn't what the captain's gaze said. Coco confirmed again. Can I really take it away? Didn't I say up to you? Chin Emo sat on the sheepskin office chair. His slender and fair fingers flipped open the contract beside him. He had a handsome face, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in his voice. Instead, it was cold for no reason. Coco saw that his captain's expression was really unfriendly. He could only shut his mouth and tentatively reached out to touch the electronic lighter. Seeing that there wasn't any reaction, he gathered his courage and put it in his pocket. He turned to leave. Chin Emo, who was sitting on the office chair, paused for a moment. When he came back to his senses, the words came out of his mouth. Put it back. Coco turned back to look at his captain. His gaze was a little shocked. After all, his captain had never gone back on his words. After Chin Emo met Coco's gaze, his voice became faint. You can choose another one. Didn't you always like the mouse I used before? When Coco heard this, his focus immediately shifted. He put the lighter on the table and said excitedly, Captain means that I can take that mouse. And Chin Emo said, holding the lighter in his hand again. Of course, Coco saw this scene. He was very puzzled. What did the captain think of this lighter? If he said it wasn't important, why did he treasure it so much? One had to know that the captain's mouse was a limited edition. Whether it was the feel or the appearance, it was first class. In the past, he wouldn't even let him touch it. Now, in order to keep the lighter, he directly abandoned the mouse. If he said it was important, just now, the captain seemed to want to throw it away. What was going on? Before Coco could figure it out, he was picked up by Feng Yi, who came to arrange work. Along the way, Coco told everything he saw to their manager. He wanted Feng Yi to help him analyze what was going on. After listening, Manager Feng frowned even more. It seemed that he still had to have a good talk with those two people. In the CEO's office, without Coco, everything seemed unusually quiet. Qin Mo glanced at the lighter in his palm and slid open the phone screen. There was still no message in the WeChat dialog box. When Feng Yi pushed the door and walked in, this was the scene he saw. Since you want to contact him, why don't you call Little Spade directly? Hearing this, Qin Mo looked up at him. Even his voice was cold. Is the company very free today? How could it be very busy? As a manager, Feng Yi still dared to say some things. If you continue like this, how are you going to play in the competition? Besides, Little Spade usually listens to you. Is there a misunderstanding? Qin Mo didn't say anything. Feng Yi continued. In a relationship, there are some things that have to be said clearly. It's useless for you to sit here like this. Qin Mo sat back and pulled off his tie, full of abstinence. The door is behind you. That meant that he could go. Feng Yi shut his mouth, but felt that it was necessary to clarify. What exactly are you angry about? This was a question without an answer. The man in front of him was still looking at the contract in his hands, cold and without a trace of space. Feng Yi knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him even if he continued asking. He glanced at the lighter that Coco had mentioned. It was obviously too important, hence, even though he was angry, he didn't throw it away. It should be from Little Spade. It seemed like he had to put in more effort to find out the reason. As the manager of the club, he didn't just have to guard against his players dating outsiders. He also had to guard against them dating insiders. You don't have to worry about my condition. Feng Yi waited for Qin Mo to speak, but he didn't say the reason. Instead, he said faintly, there won't be any problems in the competition. At this point, Feng Yi didn't know what else to say. He could only solve the problem from the side. To solve the problem from the side was to ask the other party. After leaving the office, the first thing Feng Yi did was to call Bojio. The youngster's phone went through but no one picked up. Feng Yi pressed his head, unaware that Bojio had drunk alcohol in the afternoon. Bojio drank around 10 bottles of Budweiser alone. After finishing, she returned to the dormitory and climbed onto the bed. She slept on the upper bunk, which was much quieter than the lower bunk. Classes started on Sunday afternoon. Bojio wasn't in the mood to go to class. She got on the bed, opened the quilt, and covered her head with it. She listened to the sound of rain outside. The scene on the street was still replaying in her mind. From afar, that person had been sitting in a car. He had seen her but his gaze had been indifferent, as though she was just an ordinary person. Bojio froze, her heart clenched tightly. She couldn't fall asleep at first. But after the alcohol kicked in, drowsiness slowly crept over her. Her chest was still unable to accept the emptiness, as though she had lost something. Fortunately, alcohol was useful. It could help her sleep. Hence, the sleeping Bojio didn't hear her phone vibrating. Her roommates didn't dare to disturb her, but when the phone kept ringing, they guessed that something had happened. Thorny's roommates first looked at the caller ID. The name Foxphone was especially eye-catching. He ran over and asked Bojio, "Hey, what were you punished for?" Bojio didn't reply. The teenager continued, "Let me tell you, I'm being punished unjustly this time. Do you still remember when I asked you to play for me to confirm my relationship with my girlfriend? I just went to your #1 middle school and gave my girlfriend lunch. I even used the roses planted in the school to prove my innocence. Not only did your director get angry when he saw me, he even punished me." Bojio slowed down. She glanced at him and said slowly, "That's a good punishment. I can't stand people like you who show affection everywhere." The #2 middle school youngster. It took time for the frog to jump. The school hunk of #1 middle school and the boss of #2 middle school were punished at the same time. But one of them was clean and handsome from start to finish. The other one was hit on the head by the headmaster. Shui Yaoyao saw the scene too. She placed the pencil in her hand aside. Her gaze on the youngster didn't retract. The school had to pass the test in order to successfully participate in the National League. Hence, Bojio had always been cooperative. The headmaster was satisfied with the youngster's attitude and didn't call his parents. Bojio was also glad that his parents weren't notified. After all, Chinmo's name was written in her contact list. But after this time, even if he was notified, he probably wouldn't come. Bojio sat on the edge of the field. Bojio sat at the edge of the field, using the back of her hand to wipe the sweat that was dripping down her sharp chin. The fangirls couldn't control themselves. The teachers probably knew that no one was listening to this class. Everyone's attention was on the field. But Bojio's attention was on her phone. She couldn't be too presumptuous in front of the headmaster. She found a secluded place and wanted to call Manager Feng. Chapter 960. The Japanese? The team that Hoshino was in? Alright, I'll be there in a while. Bojio stood up. She had just done her frog jumps and her legs weren't as nimble. She knocked on the phone but didn't reply immediately. Brother Mo, are you there? Fengyi glanced over at Qin Mo, who was putting on his uniform. He lowered his voice. Mate, I'm here. Bojio paused, listening to the faint voice from the other end of the phone. Who are you talking to? He didn't know why he felt guilty, so he directly hung up the phone. Fengyi listened to the busy tone, meeting Chinmo's gaze. His gaze was calm, carrying an indescribable depth. With Boss Qin's intelligence, he must have guessed who was on the other end. But for some reason, he didn't seem to understand. Boss Qin lowered his head and adjusted his sleeves, asking. Fengyi coughed lightly. It's Little Spade. The Japanese are here and they have to gather the entire team. Qin Mo didn't say anything else. As a manager who understood his team members' thoughts, Fengyi added, Little Spade said she'll be here in a while. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket, arching a brow. Oh, she's so scared that she hung up on you. Are you sure she'll be here in a while? Fengyi coughed again. This time, it wasn't intentional but he really choked. He lowered his voice. You've been waiting for her news the entire day. I asked you to contact her, but you didn't. Boss Qin. Why do you have to do this? Qin Mo glanced at him. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse. I just wanted to know my position in her heart. Now it's clear. Fengyi opened his mouth. The words were at the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't say them. He had never seen Qin Mo in such a state. Even though he was still standing, when he glanced out of the window, there was a sense of desolation. Fengyi understood that whoever started the trouble had to end it. He still had to wait for Little Spade. Let's go. Qin Mo picked up the cigarette lighter on his desk. The collar of his pure black uniform was flipped up, revealing his chiseled and cold handsome face. Fengyi heaved a long sigh and rubbed his head. On the other side, it wasn't convenient for Bojio to apply for leave the moment she finished her frog jumps. Fortunately, Yaoyao was there to testify for her. It was something that happened in the club. Otherwise, with the suspicious gaze of the headmaster, Bojio would really have to climb over the wall if she wanted to come out. The two of them took a taxi. They didn't have time to change into their combat uniforms, so they put on their school uniforms. It wasn't far from the school to the club. Bojio glanced down at her phone. She knew the problem wasn't with the medicine. In fact, the Almighty had restrained himself every time he wanted her because he was afraid of hurting her. She knew very well what the problem was. However, there were some things that could not be said. Moreover, she was about to leave. Bojio swiped the screen before sliding it back. Shui Yaoyao obviously noticed that the person sitting next to her wasn't in the right state of mind. She called out softly, Your Highness Jio. Bojio glanced over. What is it? Is something the matter? Shui Yaoyao asked directly. Bojio paused for a moment before smiling. Nothing much. I made a mistake and am reflecting on it. Face the wall in front of my phone and reflect? Shui Yaoyao didn't understand. Bojio glanced at the WeChat page again, thinking about how the person she was going to meet would treat her like a stranger. Her eyes dimmed and her silver hair drooped down. Shui Yaoyao paused. She didn't look like she was fine. But that was probably how Bojiu was. When there was no one around, no matter how lazy and dispirited she was, it wouldn't affect her devilish nature. Hence, when she reached the club, she saw a baby-faced person pointing at her. That's the guy I'm going to PK with. Bojiu swept him a glance, her voice nonchalant. Who are you? The baby-faced person's eyes widened. How can you not know who I am? Are you very handsome? Why should I know you? Bojiu walked forward, her gaze sweeping over the baby-faced person's combat uniform. She arched a brow. The baby-faced person noticed her gaze, straightening his body. You should know now, I just defeated one of your members. How is it? Do you want to PK with me? Bojiu paused, a hint of a smile on her face. I'm the first official member of our team to arrive. Is there anything to be proud of when the Japanese's first member defeated our reserve team? Bojiu seemed to be more lethal when she wasn't in a good mood. Even her words were sharper than usual. Shui Yaoyao thought. Her Highness Jiu must have spent a lot of time with the Almighty. Her venomous tongue must have picked up at least 80% of her skills. The baby-faced person's face flushed red. Unfortunately, he had only fought with reserve team members. He hadn't fought with an official member of Supreme Alliance. With Bojiu's words, he felt a suffocation in his chest, unable to take it down. At this moment, a chuckle came from the sky. Isn't that easy? Let's find an official member to PK, and see Supreme Alliance's strength. It was Watanabe. As he spoke, he glanced at Yu Cixin. Captain, am I right? Yu Cixin still had his long hair, but there wasn't a hint of femininity. When he glanced at Bojiu, his gaze deepened. He yawned lazily. Watanabe, how many times do you want me to repeat myself? Supreme Alliance is the club's decision. It's just an exchange, not a competition. Watanabe wanted to continue, but Bojiu saw his gaze deepen. Bojiu watched as the pretty boy's gaze deepened. With a lazy tone he said, In China, only the national champion has the right to compete with us. With that, Bojiu glanced at the person. Meinan smiled at her and walked over. As he brushed past her he said, I'm curious. What's your relationship with Hoshino? Why does he pay so much attention to you? Bojiu glanced up, her lips lifting. Yu Cixin waited for the youngster to speak. Just then, a familiar voice came from behind. You can ask me if you want to know. Captain, when did you start being so nosy? Yu Cixin turned towards the person who spoke. He was wearing the same uniform as him, his brows clear but his gaze was filled with warning. Yu Cixin chuckled. Alright, tell me, what do you see in him? I admire his gaming skills. Hoshino glanced at Yu Cixin. I've said that before. Yu Cixin knew that Hoshino was starting to get unhappy. He didn't want to test his limits, so he stuffed his hands into his pockets. It's just a joke. Why are you so serious? Mr. Yu Cixin might have gone overboard with his joke. Another voice rang out. It was faint, slightly cold, and had a unique feel to it. Bojiu didn't turn. She felt a warmth coming from her wrist, with a faint fragrance and a hint of tobacco. The familiar scent surrounded her along with the warmth. The next second she saw the beautiful curve of his jaw. My teammate doesn't know your teammate, Chinemo said, glancing down at her. He glanced down at Bojiu. It's better not to make some jokes, don't you think? Bojiu caught a glimpse of something else in his eyes, but before she could get a clear look, the Almighty shifted his gaze away. At the same time, he also let go of her wrist. His side profile was indeed as she had imagined, indifferent without a trace of warmth. Lin Feng, who didn't know how to read people's expressions, leaped over and said to Bojiu, Little Spade, what's going on with you and Captain? Why is he treating you differently? Is he starting to feel bored and cold towards you? Don't worry, if Captain dares to abandon you, I'll stand by your side even if I have to take the risk of rebelling. Lin Feng's voice was soft, only the two of them could hear him. Bojiu remained silent. Lin Feng felt that this matter had to be changed. Look at me, I'm so responsible. After sleeping with Yun Hu, I immediately told the surrounding people to stop having any ideas about me. I'm going to have a family in the future. You have to let Captain know about this so that you can take the initiative. Bojiu had mentioned that she hated people who showed off their affection the most. She glanced over, her tone calm. You're the one who takes the initiative? Your lips are already torn. Your words aren't convincing. If you don't have the strength to resist Almighty Yun's kisses, just say it. I won't laugh at you. Lin Feng was dealt a huge blow. He took out his phone and hurriedly looked at his lips. F***ck, it was really torn. Didn't Yun who know how to restrain himself? How was he going to brag like this? Don't tell me you're like this in bed? Bojio's final attack successfully petrified Lin Feng. When he regained his senses, Lin Feng watched the youngster's back view, his heart stifled. Why were some people like this when they were in a bad mood? Little Bojio wasn't happy. Ever since she entered, he hadn't even glanced at her. Qin Emo walked in front, his hands in his pockets clenched for a moment before relaxing again. His indifferent gaze met Hoshino's face. They stood in different positions, their gazes intersecting. Feng Yi noticed the change in the situation, speaking with a smile. Since it's just an exchange and not a competition, let's sit down and have a chat. Our friends from the media have been looking forward to the Japanese's arrival. Yu Cixin stilled, breaking into a smile. We won't be used to it if there are too many reporters. Feng Yi had expected him to say that, his lips lifting. Mr. Yu Cixin, don't worry, the Qin group has a media business. It's just an exchange, not a press conference like you are imagining. Yu Cixin narrowed his eyes. He had originally wanted to use the exchange as an excuse to take a closer look at Supreme Alliance's strengths. He hadn't expected them to use this as an excuse. It was no wonder Supreme Alliance was the wealthiest team in the industry. Supreme Alliance's manager was indeed an unscrupulous businessman. Actually, that wasn't the only reason Feng Yi had called the media over. It was because of Qin Mo's abnormal state. The media was there to remind Boss Qin that even if they had a conflict, it couldn't be displayed in front of other teams. Both of them were able to keep their composure. But because of their composure, Feng Yi was worried they would explode. After all, no one had ever been able to guess young Master Qin's thoughts correctly. A meeting between two teams, one of which was the Japanese, would be newsworthy. Even if the entire Japanese team wasn't present, Hoshino and Yu Cixin represented the entire Japanese team. Their captain and vice-captain were world-class esports experts who rarely showed their faces. Every word would become a headline in esports. The doll-faced man couldn't be rash even if he wanted to compete with Bojio. Both teams were good-looking, even if there was enmity between them. It wouldn't be displayed at such a moment. Etiquette was a basic rule of etiquette for both teams. Hence, it was a real exchange. Bojio wasn't interested in conversing. She sat very close to Hoshino and turned to glance at him. Hoshino could guess what she wanted to ask, sending a message over. I've found out about Rao Rong. I'll send you the information when I get back. Bojio replied, okay. The receptionist walked over with a tray of fruits and tea. Feng Yi had arranged for this to be a friendly gesture. But the moment the receptionist placed the tray in front of Bojio, Hoshino interrupted. Hoshino suddenly said, she doesn't eat peaches. In that instant, the receptionist wasn't the only one who froze. Even Lin Feng and the others turned towards Hoshino. How did he know Little Spade didn't eat peaches? They had interacted with Little Spade for so long and yet, he didn't seem to eat peaches. After all, Little Spade wasn't a picky eater. Hoshino seemed familiar with something they didn't know. Even though Lin Feng was naive, he was still sensitive to such matters. Did they know each other? That was his first reaction. On Qin Mo's side, the hand holding the teacup froze. He lifted his eyes and looked at the youngster indifferently. Bojio knew she couldn't let the Almighty see through her. Hence, she reached for a peach slice and placed it in her mouth. In the past, she hadn't been able to eat peaches as they would break out in rashes. But this was different. Bojio lowered her lids, swallowing the peach slice before taking a sip of tea. Hoshino's reaction was quick. He smiled naturally and added, Watanabe, did you forget how you said it wasn't nutritious the last time you ate peaches? Watanabe pointed to himself. Was that true? It seemed like there was, so he nodded. Everyone was enlightened. So he was referring to Watanabe. They had assumed Hoshino was referring to Little Spade. It was a beautiful misunderstanding. Qin Emo retracted his gaze. But he didn't release his grip. He knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. There was someone who knew him better than him. Or perhaps, you're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.